Welcome, everybody, to SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steele fans.
Woohoo.
I am Eric, and I am one of the hosts.
I am Sara, and I am hoping I don't have to evacuate during this recording due to elevator fires.
Yeah, a little detail. You can just stay there. Nobody cares if the building burns down around you. You're safe.
It's like that dog in the cartoon. This is fine.
Yeah. Anyway, This episode is Season 3, Episode 5, Blue-Blooded Steele. But before we get into that, we're going to go back in time to second base Steele, the last...
Sorry, I had to.
Time machine music. Marty, we've got to get up to 88 miles an hour. No. Anyway, I'll admit I didn't say something at the time because I was kind of feeling like, okay, I've talked so much about baseball that everybody's getting tired of it. And so when we got to the end, I had some notes there on something that I was going to say, and I just made a split-second decision not to. And as I was going back and editing the episode, it was like Sara hits it and goes right through it, and it's like, I gotta say something. So I'm sure you remember the scene. I'll let you address it. It's at the end where they're having the get together in the locker room and they're doing the dedication to Ralphie.
Yeah, they're all saying something emotional and heartfelt about Ralph. And obviously at that point, Laura suspects one of them. So she makes the comment, not exactly murderers row, are they? That's the... So
after the episode was recorded, I asked you, because I was thinking about it, I said, I asked you, what do you think that was referring to? And you said...
I thought it was to do with the death penalty. Yeah.
And you're almost right. Well, actually, you kind of are right, but not in baseball terms. Originally, the term was applied to a section of the Tombs prison in New York City, which is currently named the Manhattan Detention Complex, although through the years, that particular prison has gone through a number of different name changes and has been applied to various buildings over time. But in the 1920s, the term murderer's row was applied to a facility, which was the second one ever built, known simply as City Prison. But in baseball terms, they took that phrase and applied it to various New York Yankees baseball teams, some going back as far as the very, very early 1900s, maybe even into the late 1800s. But it's most commonly associated with the 1927 team. It was the version of the team that included the 6 most feared hitters in baseball at the time: Earl Combs, Mark Koenig, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Bob Musial, and Tony Lazzeri. In the 1927 season, they went 110 wins for 44 losses. They won the American League pennant by 19 games. What that means is that they were 19 games ahead of the next team in the league for the pennant race. And they swept the Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series. So Murderers Row was probably the most feared and considered to be the single strongest batting lineup in the entire history of baseball. And that's kind of what Laura's also referring to there. But like you, Steele didn't get it either, so you're in good company.
Well, I mean, I'm going to admit most of the baseball references went right over my head, so.
That's why I'm here.
See, but
it's my sole function.
You shouldn't have worried about having too many references to like baseball and stuff. How many Buffy comments have I made? You're good.
Yeah, but you spread them out. I was dumping them all in one episode.
That's true. That's fair.
So anyway, let's get on to Blue-Blooded Steele. And also at the end of the episode, we may jump forward in time. Ooh, how's that for a tease? Okay, Blue-Blooded Steele first aired October 30th, 1984. It was written by John Pashdick Pashtag.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
sure
not sure how he pronounces that. Brad Westwater and John Worth, and was directed by Burt Brinkerhoff. So I think this is one of the very first episodes we have where 3 separate writers are credited with the episode, not counting Michael Gleason or Butler. So,
yeah, that's true.
So this one went through a few hands. All right, I went with DVD liner notes because I thought it pretty much covered the ground without giving too much away. Remington and his mentor, Daniel Chalmers, traveled to England where Steele must prove that he's not the heir to a $12 million fortune before somebody kills him.
I gotta say, this is a fun premise. I really like this one.
Yeah, it is.
But if you look at, the only thing I did want to say before we started, if you look at the original script, this is one episode that was clearly mucked around with in terms of the timeline because it should have come before the one that comes after it. The next episode. I
kind of got myself in trouble on the Facebook group because I said I thought this should have been the season opener, which based on the production number, it would have been if we're taking the production numbers at face value, which, again, you got to use a little bit of salt on those. But I thought it was a stronger episode than Steele had it. But I was pilloried for that.
I just mean the episode that comes after this, where they go to Ireland. In the original script, when she corners him after finding out that he's pretending to be the Duke, he says to her, if you're referring to that little side trip I made to Dublin, and then she says, no, you went to Dublin to find your father. It was something you had to do. So that episode should have come before this one in the script. They must have altered the script once they decided they weren't going to put that episode first, because in this episode, as it aired, she references Steele at it instead of...
Yeah.
So.
Yes, and that was one of the things that I'd mentioned in the Facebook group is that there were references in this episode back to Steele at it that could have been altered after they had gotten news from the network that we're changing the air order of it. So they tried to clean up the continuity a little bit, but it just. Season 3, yes. Anyway.
It's a bit of a mess.
Yes.
Yeah.
The episode opens with a shot of Steele in the bathroom of his apartment shaving. And then we cut to the front door, where we see a pair of gloved hands slowly opening a case containing lock-picking tools. A tool selected and then slipped into the keyhole of the knob. The door opens, and we see a man's feet walking into the apartment. The door closes quietly, and we see the feet walking further into the apartment. One of the gloved hands picks up a fireplace poker from the rack. Then as the figure walks toward the bathroom, we see the poker being raised as in preparation for an attack. Steele, still shaving, sees the figure in the mirror and turns around, startled. But it's not a villain intent on doing Steele harm. It's Daniel Chalmers. Steele and Daniel greet each other, and Daniel says, I hereby pronounce you Reginald, Duke of Rutherford, tapping him on the shoulders with the fireplace poker as if knighting him. Well,
I mean, at this point, I don't even know why he bothers to lock his door. He should just put a sign outside that says, just don't break anything.
Yeah, there you go.
Granted, Daniel didn't do any damage, but
yes,
it doesn't
true.
seem that lock or the window / balcony is any sort of deterrent to friend or foe. So
No, it does not seem to be the case.
Yeah.
Anyway, Daniel and Steele exchange pleasantries, with Daniel suggesting that his return to town is worthy of celebration, and Steele saying that he'll get the champagne to accommodate. Steele hands the champagne bottle to Daniel, who says that he's relieved that Steele hasn't become a total heathen since they last saw each other.
I'm very amused by the fact that it literally his choice in champagne is what, sets him apart from being a total heathen.
Well, I mean, you got to have standards, right?
I mean, you know what? I know people that drink their wine from a cardboard box. They enjoy a nice.
Now, careful, because there are some fairly higher end wines that come in boxes, and there is a valid reason for that.
I thought it was just because they enjoyed a nice card Bordeaux. But sorry.
Oh.
We don't set these jokes up, folks. This comes naturally.
which tells you a lot about our senses of humor. No, I did a little research on cardboard boxed wines, and this was for one of the episodes of my White Collar podcast. And there's actually some fairly high-end wines that are going to that because it has the advantage of better shipping. I mean, you can pack them all together. They're squared cube type things. They're not bottles that take up weird sizes and spaces. So they stack easier. It's more efficient. The bag inside is sealed, and so it collapses as the wine is being poured out so that there is no problem with air getting in and oxidizing the wine, which is one of the reasons why wine, after it's been opened, has to be used in a certain amount of time, because that air exposure damages the wine. So there's actually a lot of very valid reasons for using boxes. And some of there's some higher end wines that are actually coming in that format now. So
I still like my cardboard joke.
Which is the only reason that you even brought the subject up. I know you. Anyway, so where were we? Oh, yeah. Steele retrieves a couple of champagne flutes, and he responds that he would be surprised if Daniel had traveled 7,000 miles simply to anoint his former pupil with a fireside poker. And Daniel says, on the contrary, the Duke is dead. Long live the Duke. And Steele begins backing away from Daniel, both physically and figuratively, saying, now, just a minute, old man. And so then we learn that, as Daniel reminds Steele, that 5 years prior, they had concocted a scheme. And Daniel says that at the time, Steele had said it was the most brilliant scheme that they had ever concocted. Steele points out, well, yeah, but that was 5 years ago. And Daniel informs Steele that in 2 short days, he becomes the new Duke of Rutherford. But Steele is adamant Daniel will have to find another co-conspirator. Well, Daniel's shocked. Steele had anticipated his role as the Duke's long-lost son with great relish. Yeah. And Steele grants the point, but then points out that the old buzzard lived, so he moved on. And Daniel begins to list off the inducements. A 50,000-acre English estate with land holdings in South Africa and the Caribbean.
Colonization, yay!
Now it's called enhancing the local economy. Anyway, sure. As Daniel recounts the various assets at stake, Steele begins gnawing on his thumb, which we take as a sign that he's reluctantly becoming interested despite his previously declared lack of interest.
Yeah, he's practically salivating at this point. It's quite funny to watch. And this is one of those moments where you just kind of remind yourself or you're reminded of how good a physical performer Pierce Brosnan is, because there's no lines. He doesn't have any lines here. Daniel's the one just listing off all the stuff he's going to get. And just look, the look on his face is enough to have you laughing. It's just funny.
Yeah. So anyway, where were we at? Yes. The final note in this inducement is at least 12 million pounds in the Bank of England. Oof. And at that, Steele begins to seem to consider the possibilities as he reflects.
No kidding.
12 million, is it? And Daniel, as if sensing the remaining thread holding Steele's reluctance in place, tells him that if he's worried about the unflappable Miss What's-Her-Name, and Steele supplies Holt, bring her along. There's plenty to go around.
Yeah.
And Steele equivocates, recalling Laura's attitude about what he terms his and Daniel's inglorious past. Oh. Daniel brushes the concerns aside, saying that was merely a suggestion. And as he's lifting the bottle of wine, he insists that Steele join him in a toast to Reginald Whitewood, Duke of Rutherford. And as he begins to pull out the cork or stopper, it could be a plastic one, fake cork.
If it's a high-end bottle of champagne, my guess is it's a proper cork. Because those stoppers aren't really, they don't, like, the corks are meant to sort of absorb the
Mhm.
wine. There's a whole. I remember hearing a
science behind
whole
it, yeah.
thing about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he begins pulling out the cork, and a shot shatters the window, and then the champagne bottle. And after a moment of stunned hesitation, the two men drop to the floor with Steele asking, "Was that meant for you or me?" And Daniel responds that he's not the one about to inherit a fortune. And so they begin crawling around the room, dousing the lights. And Steele inquires who else knew Daniel was coming to Los Angeles to find the Duke's long-lost son. "Oh, just the executor of the estate." And then after a moment's hesitation, he adds, "And your new cousins, of course." Steele surmises that it's probably one of those cousins who would no doubt inherit his vast fortune if anything should happen to poor old Reggie, which makes him a sitting duck.
Duke.
But Daniel, who can't resist the pun, corrects Steele's summation to say sitting Duke.
I mean, at this point, should we start a drinking game for every time they make a sitting duck reference? This is at least the third. Take a drink every time there's a sitting duck reference, or Steele gets knocked out.
Well, I only have one glass, so
Yeah.
that won't work.
That's fair.
I would be empty before we get halfway through. Anyway.
On the bright side, it might be funny to hear you do it drunk.
Anyway, Steele's had it. He stands. Hello, somebody's shooting at you, and you're going to stand?
I know. Yeah.
And he indignantly tells Daniel that he'll have to go back and say it was a big mistake. He's not the Duke. Well, another shot comes through the window. Well, duh, you just stood up. And so the two hit the floor again. Daniel balks, saying that he spent the last 3 years convincing them that Steele is the Duke's long-lost son. And besides, it's not fair of Steele to insist that Daniel impeach his own hard-earned integrity with these people.
Of course not.
No, I mean, yeah. Steele, out of friendship, says, okay, he'll go back to London alone to get Daniel off the hook. Daniel reaches into his pocket, pulls out an envelope containing airline tickets for both him and Steele on the next flight out. And obviously Daniel's not about to let Steele go off on his own, making the excuse that you need looking after. Always did.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, as Steele is thumbing through the flight documents, the door buzzer sounds. And with a sense of dismay, Steele tells Daniel, it's Laura.
So here's a question.
Okay.
How are they sure the shooting has stopped? Because they're standing and they're fine now. Like, they're not trying to protect.
Yeah. I guess it had been a minute or two since there'd been any shots. So I guess they figure, well, hey, we got to stand up sometime. If it were me,
I would spend the next month crawling on the floor. I would eat on the floor. I would sleep on the floor. I would, yeah, no, I wouldn't get up. I'd stay there.
Yeah. But after a couple of shots, I mean, the chances of any more shots coming along are going to be diminished because, you know, it gets a little awkward to be standing around with a rifle and a scope on top of a building. People tend to get a little bit curious about such things. So, you know, unless you're, oh, never mind. Anyway, yes, when Steele tells Daniel that it's Laura, obviously he was expecting her, and Daniel, of course, isn't happy, sarcastically calling Laura his biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
Steele carefully hustles Daniel to his bedroom, and then as the buzzer continues to sound, he does crawl to the window and lower the blinds.
This is my point. If he's still crawling,
yeah.
And lowering the blinds, like, that's not really going to do much.
Well, it does, because it makes it difficult to see. So then you're just shooting blind at whoever your target is. So
true, but I guess if you're determined enough.
Well, at that point, it just becomes spray and pray, and that's never a good sound way to assassinate somebody. Anyway, he grabs what appears to be a woman's slip off the couch. Am I seeing that correctly? I
wasn't sure what. Yeah, what was that?
I don't know. But to me, it looked like.
Was it a dickie? Sorry.
Hey, leave my dickie out of this. I don't know. To me, it looked like it was a woman's slip, but I could be wrong.
Well, you know what he does on his own time, I guess we shouldn't judge.
Yeah,
maybe he just likes the feel of the material. You bet you wish I'd mentioned the Dickie now, huh?
Yeah. Well, if he's got an air compressor in his room for blowing up things, then we might know. Anyway, where were we? Yes.
He got it from that store.
Large Marchmain strikes again.
Yeah.
Anyway, he grabs the slip, throws it over the photo on the wall, which has been hit with the bullet in order to cover up the bullet hole.
I don't know why. People have shot at them so many times in that apartment. Laura would probably just think it was an old bullet hole.
He tosses the airline tickets and the documents into the pot of the plant next to the door, and then, trying to be casual and mask his slight shortness of breath, he answers the door and greets Laura. And she looks at him in his robe and asks what's the matter with him. They're late. And why is it so dark in the room? We never find out what they're late for.
No, I was wondering that too. Were they saving, what species were they saving this time? That's what I would like to know. Because before it was the bald eagle, right? And then it was the whales. And I mean, to be fair, there is a foundation to save the speckled butterfly thing or whatever in this. So, could it be that made its way to America? Are they going to a foundation for that? Are they? I would like to know what they're late for.
No, I'm going to say no, because they seem confused when they learned about the foundation to save the speckled butterfly thingy. So
that's fair.
No,
that's fair.
It's not that. But yeah, they're late for something, but we never find out what.
There's a species that needed saving and didn't get saved. It is now gone because they didn't go.
Totally extinct. Yeah. Until in about 25 or 50 years, some scientist discovers it living, somewhere at the bottom of the ocean. Or
Stop making theme parks.
Yeah. Anyway, Laura reaches over to the light switch next to the front door and flips it up, but Steele steps behind her and flips it back off, stating that he prefers the dark. And of course, Laura's confused. And Steele begins putting on a distraught act, saying, "It's Daniel. He's ill. Gravely ill. Gravely ill. And he really should go to be with him, to keep the vigil. You know how excruciatingly lonely these remaining hours can be."
Yeah.
It's so funny. Overly dramatic that anyone with common sense wouldn't buy it.
No, and it's fun. Here's the thing. As funny as the melodrama is, after Can, I have to think at this point, he's just stupid. Because I can't see why he couldn't just explain the situation. It's not like they haven't been in this situation before. When Felicia first shows up in Thou Shalt Not Steal, and she gives him that ultimatum, and he says, somebody from my past has showed up and is blackmailing me. I need your help. Right? And then he, I guess gets amnesia about that, forgets about all of that, and tries to do that heist in Can, and then they end up in the freeze. You would think that of all the times to think, oh, I should lie to her again, this would not be one of them, especially since he did not get himself into this situation.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
He was minding his own business. Business. It's not a word.
It's like he just can't learn from the past.
No. I would think that if he said, listen, I've got something to tell you. Daniel just showed up. We had planned a con years ago. Daniel has roped me into this. I don't know how to get out of it, but I'm going to try. Will you help me? She might have been mad, but...
Well, she'd have been mad at Daniel, certainly.
Yeah, but I would think less, and maybe even annoyed that his past is reared up again to cause them problems, but less mad than flying all the way to London to find him playing royalty.
And to discover that he's lied to her about what's going on. Yes.
If he had any hope of ending the freeze... This is not the way to do it. What's
that saying? The cover-up is worse than the crime?
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny that you say that. My brain's just going to connect to something random here, but I'm watching
not a Buffy reference, please!
No, it's not a Buffy reference. I'm watching a docuseries right now on that website, Ashley Madison, which for people who don't know, Ashley Madison was started in Canada, and it was a website, a dating website for married people wanting to have an affair. Their tagline was "Life's short, have an affair." And the docuseries details, essentially in 2015, they got hacked, and the hackers threatened to expose all the data of all their users if they didn't shut down the website. Well, they played chicken with the hackers and didn't shut it down, and the data was dumped onto the internet, and literally every cheater was exposed. And some of them were pretty high profile. Like there were politicians, there were actors, there were, people that were known for their happy marriages, blah, blah, blah. But it's just funny because, watching it, I'm seeing all these people whine and complain about getting caught, but not whining and complaining about joining the website in the first place. Like there's this one guy who became a rather known vlogger who made videos on his and his family's supposedly perfect, happy life. And throughout the documentary, he's explaining, like, trying to justify his actions. Oh, marriage is hard and having a child is hard. And in retrospect, I shouldn't have put my real information in there. No, in retrospect, you shouldn't have signed up for the damn website. And in this case, it's kind of the same.
Yeah, it's like all the people that do something, and then when somebody says something about it, makes it public, it's like it's their fault that this happened, because if they hadn't said anything about it, it's like it would never have happened. It's like, no, they said something about it because you did it in the first place.
Because you did it. So, and here is Steele doing the same, making the same mistake. And there's a lot of times where Laura, I think, is at fault for their relationship not progressing. But then he goes and does stuff like this that justifies that mistrust, and it puts them back at square one again. And it feels so unnecessary because he did not start this. Daniel showed up out of the blue.
Yeah. But he voluntarily shot himself in the foot, figuratively speaking. Yeah. Anyway, then the next thing happens when Daniel says, or when Steele says, it's Daniel. Laura asks, who's Daniel? It's like, hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
That's a weird
Do you not
one
remember Sting a Steele?
You know what, though? I have a feeling that line was in there only because they needed to remind the audience of who Daniel was.
Well, that could be.
Because this is episodic television, and if you miss that episode, you might not, you might not know, kind of thing. So, yeah, it does seem silly that Laura would say, who's Daniel? But I think they could have written it better. He could have said, you remember Daniel when he showed up before, blah, blah, blah.
Or when he said it's Daniel, she could have said Daniel Chalmers, the same man who got my mother caught up in a
yeah, precisely. There would have been better ways to do it, but that line was purely exposition related. Who's Daniel?
All right, I'll give you that one. Anyway, when in response to her query, Steele tells her that Daniel is in London. She offers to immediately get the pair of them plane tickets to go, but Steele hollers, no! And he's in something of a panic. He says he's already taken care of it. Again, how could Laura not realize that something is up?
This is classic I'm hiding something behavior.
Yes.
Nobody is that panicked about not going. Like, yeah.
But Laura buys it, and she begins heading to his bedroom, telling him that she'll pack his things while he gets ready. And then they'll swing by her loft and...
What?
Yeah, that's what she says. She'll pack his things while he gets ready. Isn't that what getting ready is? But anyway.
This part kills me, though. I mean, since when does she pack for him?
But she says she will, and then they'll swing by her loft and pick up her things on the way to the airport. But Steele cuts her off tries to cut her off before she gets to the room. But he fails. She gets into the room, gets to the closet, and slides open one of the panel doors. And just as she does, very nearly spoiling Daniel's hiding place, Steele grabs her arm and spins her around, and he gives her a lame excuse that he would feel better keeping it exclusive between himself and Daniel. And Laura, who seems to once again be less of the detective than she was in season 1, attributes Steele's attitude to Daniel being like a father to him. She tells him to go, and she'll just be a phone call away.
To be fair, she probably would have fallen for this in season 1 as well, but only because she didn't know better.
Yes.
Like
now she should know better.
The lessons are learned here. And anything involving Daniel Chalmers, especially when he's going out of his way to not have her involved after Can,
red
all of those things should point. Yeah, he's a walking red flag at this point. It just.
I should have dressed him up in a red suit. Anyway, she again tries to slip into the closet, but Steele reaches around, slides the door shut, which is hiding Daniel, and then slides open the other one, saying that, oh, his suits are over here. Laura spins around and slides the first door back open again, saying he'll need a tie. Okay. The fact that she knows which part of his closet he keeps his tie in is a bit, that's, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't normally.
He does possibly have her slip, so I don't know. Maybe they're.
Anyway. Yeah, it just seems odd to me that she knows exactly where he keeps his ties. Anyway, Steele grabs her and pulls her to him, hugging her, keeping her back from the closet, saying, let's not think about the worst. Laura tries to console him, saying, let's hope for a quick and full recovery. And by the way, what time is your flight? Steele hesitates, and he has to wait for Daniel to silently mouth the information before answering.
Why does he give her the right time? He would,
Yeah, an hour later.
Yeah. Then she shows up and he's already gone, and no harm, no foul.
I guess he might have thought that might seem suspicious. None of his behavior up to this point was suspicious, but that might be suspicious if he gave her the wrong time.
Maybe.
Anyway, at the airport, Laura sees Steele to the screening area, and then after some parting words, she turns as if to leave and then walks away watching Steele. And Steele walks through the security gate, waves at her, and then watches her.
I'm curious as to what passport he's using. Because he doesn't have his Remington Steele one yet, so he's clearly traveling under one of his other fake identities.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
I'd just be curious as to which one he picked. Probably the British one, which was, I think, he had Richard Blaine was Australia. Douglas Quintain, I think, was England.
Yeah, that was probably it, yeah. Anyway, so Steele's watching Laura watch him, and Laura's watching Steele watch her, and they're each waiting for the other one to move until they think that the other one is truly left before they leave themselves. Well, Laura slips behind a pillar, and Steele, thinking that she's left and he's in the clear, walks down the hallway where he joyously meets up with Daniel. But of course, Laura hasn't left. She sees the two of them together and finally realizes something's not right here.
Well, I wonder if she had at least a little bit of suspicion. Otherwise, why stick around and hide behind the pillar?
Yeah, she probably did. Yeah. But kind of late. Anyway.
Yeah.
Laura rushes to a payphone, calls Mildred, and instructs her to grab Laura's passport and bring it to her at the international terminal. As she hangs up, she hears the call. This is your final boarding call for Flight 120 to London. She runs to the desk, cuts the line.
Right? Rude.
Yeah, rude, yeah. Demands a ticket on Flight 120, but is told that the flight is full. And the agent, who obviously is not all that concerned with, taking care of her needs and answering her questions and getting her whatever she needs to get on a plane, kind of ignores her. And then he says, well, the best he can do is put her on standby.
Okay, I have some questions here. In fact, I have many questions about this whole airport situation. But question number one, that's the final boarding call, which means they're leaving. How can she get put on standby for a full flight that is basically on the way out the door?
That's a good question.
As somebody who came this close to missing a flight to Scotland once, they don't wait. They leave unless there's weather or something that delays the flight, they leave when they're supposed to leave, whether you're on it or not.
The only thing I can think of is that they don't know if they're going to have any seats available for standby until everybody that has a boarding pass is on the plane.
True.
So it may be that
they're saying, final boarding call, I'm guessing that everybody's on, or at least mostly everybody.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's the final boarding call for people who have confirmed tickets, I'm thinking. And so After they get everybody on, then they say, okay, that's everybody that's got a ticket. They're on. We're drawing the line here. We got 3 seats open, you, and you.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the
I don't
only
know,
thing
it
I can
confused
think
me
of.
a bit because, like, we flew to Scotland back in, I think it might have been 2010, and we left, to some context, Toronto's 2 hours away from London, and that's where the airport is. If you want a direct flight, you can get a flight from London to Toronto and then Toronto to, but that's a pain in the butt. So we drive, and we left at like 11 a.m. for what was a 7 p.m. flight, thinking we had more than enough time to get to the airport. But then there was a serious accident on the highway, on the 401, and we were stopped. Like, they closed the highway down for like 5 hours. And so we were stuck there. We couldn't get off the highway because the traffic was not moving at all. And we had to go to the bathroom. It was awful.
Coffee can.
Eventually, when it did open, we were just about to get off the exit because we had started moving a little bit, and we were just about to get off the exit. If we'd gotten off on that exit, we never would have made it because that exit was also backed up from all the cars. But they opened the highway just at the very last minute. We were able to sort of scoot back onto the highway, and we made it. Like, it was Home Alone style, running for the plane. We got there 5 minutes, final boarding call before the gate closed, and that was like, if we had been 5 minutes later, we would have been out of luck. So that's kind of how I took this scene. And consequently, it's the same reason we now, whenever we fly out of Toronto, we book a hotel the night before and we stay over and take the airport shuttle. Because,
well,
yeah.
I guess the only other thing I can say besides the theory I already advanced is that this was 1983, or the early 80s. And so the way things worked back then, I didn't do a lot of flying back then, so I can't say. They may have been a little bit different than they are now.
I have more questions. Speaking of that, I've got more questions when we get to Laura arriving
in the UK. Keep firing them away, and I'll keep pretending.
So yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Did you have another question?
No, not right now. When I get to it,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyway, next we're seeing the inside of the airplane. Steele and Daniel are taking...
Oh, that sounds like that's a ship name. Staniel.
Steele and Daniel are talking over glasses of champagne. Daniel tells Steele that once the investiture is over, they'll spend a few months in the south of France to catch their breath. When Steele tries to protest, Daniel, who either misunderstands or wants to misunderstand, assures him that there's nothing to worry about, just a small ceremony to make sure Steele's ascension to dukedom is official. Steele sternly says that he's only going to London to extricate himself from the scheme, but Daniel insists that he's just thinking of their future. Well, Steele disagrees, saying that no, Daniel's only thinking of his future.
I gotta say, this is nice. First class, like, I mean, obviously it depends on the airline. I've flown first class twice, and not one of those situations looked like that. So,
well, 747, they did have
that's nice
lounges and such. So yeah. So as dinner service is announced, they return from the lounge to their seats. Steele reminds Daniel, who has been insistent on calling Steele Harry, that the name is Steele, Remington Steele. And Daniel says, well, of course, Harry, whatever you say in response.
Yeah, he's like a parent sort of placating a small child that, no, that's not my name. My name is this. Sure.
Yeah. And Steele shakes his head in frustration at Daniel's obvious patronizing. Anyway, then Laura, it seems, has managed to get on the flight. We see her in the back of the cattle car seats.
Second question.
Okay.
So she is on the same flight as Steele, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How the ever-loving heck did she get on that flight without a passport?
Do you need the passport to get on the flight or to get off the flight through the terminal area into the other country?
I have never, ever, ever flown internationally without having to show my passport, both when you go to pick up your tickets and when you arrive in the country of destination.
Isn't that the there was that Tom Hanks movie, The Terminal, and isn't that supposed to be based on a true story? And isn't that the situation that happened where somebody got on a flight to a place and he couldn't get in through customs because he didn't have a passport?
I thought that was a I can't remember what the situation was with that, but I don't think it had to do with. I think it had to do with the citizenship in question. There'd been a coup or something in his country, and he. Now I'm looking it up because it was.
I never saw the movie, so I'm just talking off the top of my head.
So here's the thing: like I flew to Florida the first time I flew to internationally. I was 9, so that would have been 1990, or 91. So not too long after. I mean, about 10 years later. But in order to, we used to be able to cross the border by car without a passport. You could just show your driver's license if you were Canadian, and you guys just let us in. You trusted us, I guess. I don't know. That's no longer the case now, but flying was a different matter. Flying, you had to present, because I remember having to get a passport. That was when I got my first passport. In order
and when was that?
It was 1991. In order to go to Florida. So, but I had to show it going to and coming.
What airline were you on?
Oh God, I was 9. I don't know.
Okay.
Probably Air Canada.
The only thing that comes to mind, and it just came to mind when you were saying this, is that it may have to do with the flag that the carrier is flying under. Because if you're,
maybe, yeah, but
if you're boarding an American airline flying under an American flag going to Britain, that airplane is still considered, I guess, American territory. Whereas if you're getting on to a airline that is flying a British flag, then as you're getting onto the airplane, technically you're getting onto, that might be the difference there. I don't know.
It could be.
I'm just guessing.
It's just, I've flown to the States. I've flown to Britain. I've flown to Cuba. I've flown to Venezuela. I've never once not had to show a passport both ways, like both.
Okay.
It's like it's the required piece of ID that you have to have. I just looked up the plot to The Terminal, which is a true story. Victor Navorsky, a traveler from Krakozia, I probably pronounced that wrong.
That sounds like a made-up name. Krakozia.
Arrives at New York City's John F. Kennedy Airport and learns that a coup d'etat has occurred back home. The United States does not recognize his new government, rendering his passport invalid and leaving him unable to enter the United States or return. So he obviously, his passport was valid when he got on the plane, but not when he arrived.
Yeah.
Because you also usually have to fill out, like, when you're on the plane, you also have to fill out a bunch of stuff that probably you didn't have to fill out back in the 80s, but now when you get on a plane, you have to fill out stuff, especially if you're flying to Britain, about whether or not you visited any farms because of mad cow disease and stuff. So, but yeah, I just found that really weird that they let her on the, like, she didn't have her purse. She didn't have any ID with her at all. How would she?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was the 80s. Things were
even
different.
If it was a little lax and they required only a driver's license, which I would
she
be
didn't even have that, yeah.
She didn't have that.
Well, no, she would have had to have had that. She would have had to have had that because she drove to the airport, presumably.
Well, Fred might have driven them to the airport. She didn't have her purse. Or she did have her purse because she got it. I'm so confused. She did have a purse. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But even if she didn't have a purse, I mean, she may have not a backpack type thing, but maybe somewhere, one of those bras that has the secret pocket in it.
And even if she knew, like, she would have known that she could get us, even if they were fine with her just showing a driver's license to get on the plane. She had to have known that getting off would require a passport. Yeah. And therefore she'd have to wait regardless. It just seemed silly to...
But it's an impulsive act without thought or planning. So, yeah. I mean, that's how people get into these situations. They act impulsively without thinking and planning.
Yeah.
So, anyway, back into the episode. She's back in the cattle car seats, and it's not a comfortable situation, both in terms of the physical confinement as well as in terms of the company. So next to her, go ahead.
The peanut guy, is that the same actor who played Bitterman in the sleep study episode? Because it certainly looked like him. I should have looked it up. I should have looked it up. I could just have answered my own question. But
no. Okay. I don't think he is. I'm
Also,
just basing this on his appearance.
The script has this scene very different, and I because in what we got, the other guy starts hitting on her, but in the script, the guy on the other side, not the peanut guy, he starts panicking about the airplane. Like,
yes,
that
that is totally different. He's a father, and he's
what was that? Did you hear that? The landing gear. The gear's not up. The struts, metal fatigue in the struts, rivets. I've seen rivets pop on these babies like popcorn. Somebody's out there. Oh my God, somebody's out there on the wing. We're going down. We're going to buy the farm, lady. I know it. Like, I kind of wanted to have seen that.
Well,
I'll never see my kids again.
I'm glad they didn't go that way. Well, first of all, a lot of people have flight phobia, and so that probably wouldn't have gone over too well, and I'm sure the airlines wouldn't have appreciated it. The other thing is that I think the situation that they wound up with of the young guy trying to hit on her is probably something that
more
does
realistic.
happen.
Yeah, I was going to say
more
probably,
often than the other.
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing worse than getting stuck next to somebody on a flight you don't want to talk to for whatever reason, whether it's because they're hitting on you or just they want to chat the whole way, and all you want to do is put on your headphones and not speak.
Well, that's where Laura winds up going, because the older man on her left seems to be on a mission to acquire as many packets of peanuts as possible from anyone willing to give them up, while the younger man on her right starts hitting on her, trying to make a pass at her. And with 2 cigarettes in the mouth and lights one, and here you go,
the good
baby.
old days when you could pollute your lungs on a plane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that whole thing, they do it in movies and TV shows, well, they used to a lot, where you put 2 in your mouth and you light it and you hand one to the other person. Did anybody actually really do that? I mean, I can't imagine.
As a non-smoker, I can't say that I've ever encountered that experience, but I would say, even if I did smoke, I don't know where that person's mouth has been. No, thank you.
Evil thought.
I'm just saying, I won't even drink from my husband's cup.
Oh, really? He might have cooties.
He might have cooties. Boys,
you'll kiss him, but you won't drink from his cup.
Well, yeah. I mean, I never said it made sense.
Think about this.
Although it's funny, I won't drink from his cup, but I will share a bottle of water with my daughter. I have no explanation for that whatsoever. She's probably way grosser than him because she's 8, but that's where we're at.
Wash back. Kids always wash back.
Kids are nasty, man. But yeah, I don't know. It might be because we share DNA. I have no idea.
So anyway, eventually, Laura starts banging on the hostess call button, trying to get the release button on the seat to release, and so she can lean back at least far enough to get away from the young man trying to hit on her. The hostess arrives, asks what she wants. Laura says, "I'd like a glass of wine." The man says, "Make it 2." And then he tries to pay for it, but Laura declines his offer, trying to subtly and politely spurn the unwanted advances. And then the hostess
I gotta
asks,
say though, like I feel for Laura here, because there's nothing worse than having somebody insist on paying for something when you don't like. And I know that sounds you just rolled your eyes at me. I know that sounds like a first world problem.
No, I didn't roll my eyes.
If you think about
I didn't roll my eyes. I really
whether
didn't.
You're
I
interested
didn't roll my eyes.
He did, everybody. Whether you're interested in the person or not, there's a feeling of I don't know, like
it creates a sense of obligation.
Yes, exactly. And
that's what I was rolling my eyes at.
Exactly.
And attitude of that.
Back 100 years ago when I was dating, I
Only
would
100 years?
Yeah, well, it's been
you're
give
getting
or take
old.
a century, yeah. Any dates I went on, I was very upfront at the beginning that I was paying for my own meal, because I didn't want that. Like, even if I like the person, I don't want to feel like. Now, my husband and I are married. We do have our own bank accounts, but the
and you
unspoken
still won't
rule,
let him buy your own
Well, no,
your
the
meal.
the unspoken rule now is whoever suggests it pays for it. So if I suggest we go out to dinner, I pay for dinner. If he suggests it, he pays for it. That's kind of how we.
How often does he suggest it?
More often than you'd think. So I mean, but yeah, like that's it. It becomes a more. But being married, that sense of obligation isn't necessarily there anymore, right? Like we're stuck together for life. So, you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, if it's somebody that or someone buys you a drink in a restaurant or something like that, I usually decline A because of that reason, and B, you don't know if they've put something in it. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I'm with Laura on this one. I've had people get mad at me for wanting to pay for my own meal, and it's like, okay, but you know.
Well, yeah. I would say that there's ways of dealing with the potential unwanted addition to a drink, which involves getting it directly from the server.
Yeah. Oh,
but,
yeah.
I can. Yeah, I can understand. Anyway, at this point, the hostess asks if they want a headset to listen to the in-flight movie, and the young man hopefully declines, while Laura eagerly says, yes.
Yes.
And again, the young man insists on paying for them, which this time Laura doesn't decline.
Yep.
So
yeah, no, she's good with that one.
yeah. Well, after she's put him on and stuck him in her ears, the older man on the opposite side pulls the earpiece out of her ear and says, "Get another bag of peanuts." So Laura asks the hostess, how much do the peanuts cost? And when the hostess says they're free, the man pulls the earpiece away a second time and says, "Get two."
I gotta wonder
like
if he's
guy.
incapable of speaking to the flight attendant himself. Why is Laura the one that has to
That's
do
true.
it? It's a little
Good
weird.
question.
Why can't he? And if he's so hung up on peanuts, why can't he just be like, keep them coming, you know?
Well, and it could be that he's already gone through his allotment of them, and they've cut him off. You know,
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir. That's you're cut off.
Yeah. We have a 4-pack limit, and you've already exceeded that.
You're over the limit.
They're going to breathalyze you for peanuts at the end, and we don't want to get in trouble. Yes,
his peanut breath would be nasty. Well, thanks.
Well, at the London airport, Laura hangs back watching Steele and Daniel pass through customs. And after they have cleared the area, she rushes forward to follow, except, as you have so astutely pointed out, she doesn't have her passport.
Nope.
She does hem and haw for a few moments and makes the excuse that she must have left it on the plane, knowing fully well she didn't.
I mean, what does she think that customs are going to do? Be like, oh, well, in that case, go on in.
Yeah.
I mean, I know things were a little more lax in the 80s, but come on.
Well, maybe she thought she could flirt her way through. Who knows?
Maybe.
Anyway, the guy tells her she can't go through without it, and knowing that she's going to have to wait until she somehow gets her passport for admittance beyond the customs area, she turns to leave and stops the young man who is next in line and asks him how he'd like to make $100, following two men, of course.
Yeah.
I think he might have had another idea in mind to begin with, but yeah, she clarifies
that. I like that dress she's wearing. I know it's random, but
yeah, it's okay.
I know.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Like it. I just think it complements her silhouette. She's tall, and it makes her look less like she's thin, obviously, but it doesn't make her look like she is too thin. It gives her a bit of a more like a silhouette.
I'm going to disagree with that part. I think it still makes it pretty apparent that she's thinner than I would like. Anyway, let's not go there.
We need a segment on the fashion opinions that differ here, because it seems like if it's not baseball pants, Eric's not interested.
I didn't say that. I just said. Back into the episode. We're next inside the lavish and large mansion. It's obviously a mansion, although I think later they call it a castle. Steele and Daniel
they refer to it as both a castle and an estate.
Oh. Yes. Well, the estate is the entire property, and the building is, I guess, the castle on the estate. Steele and Daniel are being escorted down a grand staircase by a servant, and they are hanging back to converse privately. Daniel calls the property impressive, and Steele comments that it's impressive enough to kill for. And Daniel says, well, their only challenge is going to be to keep Steele alive until after the ceremony at noon the following day. And Steele, of course, wonders how that's going to keep whoever's trying to kill him from trying it again afterwards. Daniel clarifies, saying that once Steele has succeeded the Duke, his will is fulfilled, and killing Steele won't get anyone anything unless they're named in Steele's will.
Which means instead of trying to kill him, they'll just start sucking up to him.
Yeah. So after that conversation, they are escorted to a doorway of a large room. They hesitate at the doorway, and at the far end, we see the disapproving trio, their relatives. We have Angus, as the script calls him, a snobbish public school type, never without a drink in his hand and always a bit soused. Archie, which the script calls a stuffy military type, dressed in a dark blazer adorned with a regimental badge, very by the book. And Gwen, a modern debutante type, dressed in riding breeches, tucked into riding boots, and very likely holding a vicious riding crop behind her back,
So
in case the opportunity for this is mine, in case the opportunity for a little creative fun should arise.
I was going to say, they're not baseball pants, but do riding pants do it? Or is it just the baseball pants?
Well, not necessarily, no. And see, also part of it, you gotta keep in mind that part of it is the personality of the person.
I'm just teasing you.
No. You brought it up. You're going to have to suffer through this.
All right.
There are people who, depending on their mood, can either be attractive to somebody or they can be repulsive. I used to work with somebody whose wife
I fully agree with you there.
was one of those. I mean, when she was in a good mood and she was being friendly and nice and getting along with everybody, you could look at her and say, yeah, she's attractive. But when she was on her horse and riding for blood, it was like, ooh, that's not, no,
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you there that a good-looking person can become ugly real quick with a terrible personality, for sure.
Yes. Anyway, we see the three discussing Steele. Angus comments that Steele looks very much like the Duke. Gwen points out that the Duke was 96 years old, so who could tell? Archie observes that Steele does appear to have the whitewood nose, at least as far as I can tell. And Angus dismisses Archie's conclusion as useless, saying that the same claim could be made by at least half of the bastard sons of Rutherford County.
Which means that so that Duke got around.
Yes.
Awkward.
Yes. Well, I mean, isn't that kind of in keeping with the popular opinion about certain classes of royalty in historic Britain?
It's fair.
Anyway, Gwen concludes by noting that Steele does seem to have at least a quite decent tailor, which I guess, there you go.
That would matter. Yeah, if you're royalty.
That's important. Sure. Daniel and Steele enter the room and approach the terrible trio. Daniel greets them and then introduces Remington as Reginald Whitewood. And after a moment, Steele emphatically states that, yes, he's Reginald Whitewood, but he's not the Reginald Whitewood. And, of course, everybody acts with surprise, and Daniel, somewhat taken aback at this, unexpected twists, and with an awkward tension asks, what do you mean not the Reginald Whitewood? And with that, Steele launches into a complicated explanation of how, yes, his name is Reggie Whitewood, and there are similarities in his own background and that of the Whitewood cousin, that Daniel, after having found him, was devastated to find that he wasn't the Reggie in question. But he decided to accompany Daniel to clarify everything for everyone, finally attempting to ensure the trio that he lays no claim whatsoever to the Duke's inheritance. Well, as Steele digs deeper into his story, Daniel is at first seemingly perplexed, then astounded, injecting mid-story, "You're really going to do this, aren't you?"
It's bizarre that I guess he's just been willfully ignoring him the whole time, because Steele has been telling him the whole time, I'm not doing this. So
well, and that's kind of what I alluded to earlier, is that Daniel doesn't want to hear it. He's only hearing what he wants to hear. Yeah. And he, I was going to bring this up later on because it becomes very, very apparent later on in the script, but we can see a lot of Remington in Daniel.
Oh,
or
tons.
a lot of Daniel in Remington, vice
Yeah.
versa. You know, this attitude of, I don't want to hear something, so I'm going to ignore it.
I'm going to ignore it. Yeah.
And then later in the episode, near the end, that becomes incredibly apparent. And it's funny because later on in the scene where Daniel's accusing somebody, it very much is reminiscent of Steele going off on a tangent, and Laura's sitting there saying, what about this? What about that? What about this? And Steele saying, no, don't worry about it. Minor detail. Don't worry about the facts.
I thought the same thing. I thought they really are like father, like son. And it really makes you wonder, because we've already speculated about this.
Mhm.
This was not a time where usually they would plan too far in advance for plot lines like this.
Mhm.
But they've already made the comments about him being like a father to him twice, in both
Mhm.
in Sting of Steel and now in this episode. And it just seems that even if they didn't intend it, they were definitely keeping it in their back pocket as a possibility. Because
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the terrible trio who has been silent through Steele's story suddenly act as if Steele has pulled the greatest prank ever, with Archie shaking Steele's hand and Gwyn giving him an anything but cousinly kiss.
Yeah, so here's another question that I have, because it's revealed at the end that they're not the would-be killers, not like the terrible
Mhm.
trio are not involved in the plot to try to kill him.
Right.
So, and it seems they're unaware of it too, because they are at least unaware of who's responsible.
Mhm.
So is she just totally cool with like making out with her cousin, because they're supposed to be related?
Well, you know, if something happens and she happens to marry him, then she doubles her income.
And birth defects.
Well,
She hits on him throughout this entire episode, and I cringe because it's
apparently cousins becoming romantically involved is not as frowned upon as one might think.
No, it's disturbing, actually. I looked it up because I was grossed out by this whole thing.
Well,
And the UK, it is legal for first cousins to marry in the UK.
well, somebody my wife and I knew personally had married cousins married.
Mhm.
And there is a famous person that I know, and okay, I'll go ahead and mention the name. Richard Carpenter of the Carpenters.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Married his cousin.
Ouch. Ugh.
Mary Carpenter is his cousin. So,
So here's my theory then. If the Duke of Rutherford was so promiscuous,
everybody's related to everybody
I was
else.
Say, maybe there's just no point in even like
trying to
wondering
avoid
about it. They're just like, you know what? At this point, someone's going to be a relative. So,
Yep.
But it's interesting because you hear these stories of people that get married and then find out later on that they're related somehow. They didn't know because they're either long lost siblings or what have you. And apparently, there is a scientific explanation for why that sometimes happens. That the genetic link between the two people, even if they don't know each other or have never met, is enough to simulate a feeling like they've known each other, or like a feeling of closeness, and that in turn leads them to becoming involved. I had a friend who had a long lost brother that she was searching for, specifically because, well, partly because she wanted to meet her brother, but also because she was dating at the time and didn't want to end up marrying somebody that was her brother. So,
well, you know, technically we're all related somehow, far enough back if you want to follow it back. So,
that's true.
You know, somebody might say, well, then what does it matter? Anyway, so where were we? Yes. Steele does not know how to respond to their take of the situation, thinking he's pulling a prank on them. And then they turn to salute him. Long live the Whitewoods, long live the Duke, long live the new Duke. And he's a little uncomfortable.
Do you think that they actually believe he's the Duke, or do you think that they are playing along because they know about the clause in the will that says Like, it doesn't benefit them either way, so.
Well, there's a very narrow window of benefit for them. And that's from the time that he is found to the time that he is installed as the new Duke. Because as long as he's found, as we find out later,
yeah,
if he doesn't make it to dukedom, then they're going to benefit. So there's a very, very narrow time frame. I would think, and we never get a really good answer to that question. Stop asking these questions. I've only got 3.5 hours left on my memory card. Not even that anymore.
Well, it's just, they're not the ones trying to kill him. So I'm curious as to whether they actually think that he's the Duke and they're just trying to ingratiate themselves so that maybe, like we said earlier, he puts them in his will, or...
I think they're just hedging their bets. I'm not sure that they think he is or isn't the Duke, but at this point, it probably seems that he may be. And so they're probably just trying to hedge their bets, get in good with him so that they'll get into his will. And also, if something should happen to him before he gets, installed as the new Duke, then nobody will say, well, how about you? You might have wanted him to. Oh, no. We were getting along just wonderfully.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Steele turns to Daniel, pleading look on his face, but Daniel simply bows and joins in the salute, saying, Your Grace. Well, back at the airport, Mildred has shown up with Laura's passport, and she finds Laura stretched out on the hard plastic seats. Oh.
Yeah. And you know what? That would have been... So I've flown from Scotland to Vancouver, which is on the same coast as California. Mm-hmm. Obviously not quite the same distance, but that was like an 8-hour flight.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at like 10 hours or so that she spent laying there on those seats.
Yeah. Trying to get a nap, I'm sure.
Depending on when the next flight was. Because if there wasn't another flight for the... like,
yeah, that's true.
She could have been there
we know that it was less than probably 24 hours, probably less than 12 hours, because most of this seems to occur, at least the first half of the episode, occurs that day, because we know that he's going to be installed as the new Duke the following day. So, yeah, it's a
little wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, because there'd be like 8 to 10 hours there on a plane. Has to pass.
Well, and not only that, but the time zones. You think about the fact that if they had left California at noon, then at the time they're leaving California in London, that would be
8 hours.
Is it 8 hours? Okay, so it's 8 o'clock that night.
Yeah.
8 o'clock that night. So if it's what is the duration of the flight? Any idea? Maybe 10 hours on the flight?
It'd be about 8 hours, or 8 or 9 hours, probably.
Okay, so yeah, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, because it don't work math wise.
No. Well, and also, where did she go to the bathroom?
They've got public restrooms in the airports.
Well, yeah, but between where you get off the flight and where you get into the country, like they're not letting her in.
Why not? So. I don't know.
Because most
fenced
people
in like cattle.
Most people don't hang around. Most people enter.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I mean, you never know. They might. They could. I've never been to the airport in London, so I don't know. But anyway,
I've been to Heathrow.
You have? Okay. Do they have bathrooms there?
Not between, from what I saw, not between getting off the plane and getting into the country.
Okay. All right. But... So only people in Britain are allowed to go to the bathroom. If you're not in Britain, you're not allowed to go. You gotta hold it.
I could be wrong. I mean, there's a very good chance I just didn't notice, but I have flown to Heathrow. So.
Well, I mean, I guess, if you don't need to look for it, you probably wouldn't be looking for it. That's true.
It's true.
Anyway, after a quick greeting, Mildred asks what's going on. Laura says, well, that all depends on who you ask. So let's ask Mr. Steele. Back at the Whitewood estate, Steele is ruminating, saying that it makes no sense that they would first try to kill him and then embrace him with open arms, knowing all the while that if Steele becomes the Duke, or he says the Prince, they become paupers. Yeah. and Daniel corrects him, not Prince Harry, Duke, the Duke of Rutherford. But Steele can't get over the feeling that his every move is being scrutinized and watched, and that the whole place just gives him the willies. And of course, we see the classic eyes cut out of the painting so somebody can spy on the room bit.
Yeah.
illustrating that, yes, he is indeed being secretly observed. Well,
Yep.
Armstrong, the butler, enters the room and announces, "The executor will see you, Your Grace." As Daniel and Steele follow Armstrong, the two again hold back and converse. Steele doesn't think it'll be difficult to persuade the executor that he isn't the Duke, but it seems Daniel has forgotten to mention one little detail.
Convenient.
He asks Steele if he remembers the judge who gave Theo Davis 20 years for the pedigree dog swindle. Well, he does. Penhaligon, who Steele labels as a merciless bugger. And whatever happened to him? When Daniel has an answer, Steele begins to panic as he realizes the meaning of the silence and realizes that he's trapped, saying that one whiff of fraud and he'll lock us up and throw away the key.
I wonder how common it is for a judge to go from being a judge to an executor for a will.
Well, I mean, anybody can be an executor for a will.
I suppose.
So, if
Yeah,
the
that's true.
Duke really was good buddies with the judge and thought he was the best person to act as executor, no, I don't see any conflict of interest there. But anyway, after Steele says this, Daniel, with what has got to be, at least this is how I interpret it, a perverse sense of satisfaction at having boxed Steele in nicely, despite his efforts to escape, disingenuously says, "It is a bother, isn't it?"
Yeah, he's very smug. He knows he's got him, and he's smug as hell.
Oh, yes. Next, we see Gwen. She's leading a tour of the grounds for a group of visitors. All women, mostly old women. As the group enters the garden area, Fred Blocks, the groundskeeper, is busy at work, feeding lawn debris into a wood chipper. Gwen describes Blocks as an ex-military man who loves complete order and cannot restrain himself from personally imposing it upon the gardens at Rutherford Castle. I think she's almost dripping with... yeah.
It's a very interesting way to introduce the groundskeeper, especially since an estate that large, first of all, you wouldn't just have one groundskeeper, you'd have a whole team. But
he's the one she takes the most interest in.
Usually royal or people that are noble and have estates that big want complete order imposed on their grounds. Like, they don't like grass and flowers just growing all willy-nilly.
Right, but she seems to take an extremely personal pleasure in selecting those terms to describe him. So there's more than just mere there's something going on there.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about the type of person that Gwen is.
Yeah.
Anyway, amongst the guests on the tour is one Laura Holt.
So she paid the guy to follow Steele.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming they must have exchanged phone numbers or something, because otherwise, I mean,
had to have some sort of contact information. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, my brain's just trying to figure out how this episode works.
Back inside, the judge is commenting about how fortunate it is that Daniel has been able to provide the most irrefutable proof of claim he's ever seen. Given that typically in these cases of long-lost relatives returning, legal verification of identity often drags in the courts for years. And Steele, through gritted teeth, grudgingly responds. The judge continues on, expressing his optimism for the future of the country with young men such as yourself. He extols the late Duke as a great man, and then he takes leave of them so as to make his way to the bar and get soused before dinner, although he euphemistically calls it arrest.
Yeah. I gotta wonder what the irrefutable proof was. It's not like they had DNA the way we have DNA now. So
whatever it is, it's locked up in that safe.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, after the judge departs, Steele asks Daniel about the documentation he so thoughtfully provided. And here's where we learn it's in the safe behind a painting on the wall. And Steele suggests that with a few minor alterations, he should be able to get himself off the hook. And Steele gleefully steps toward the painting in the safe while Daniel mentally wrestles with himself, trying to wrap his head around Steele's attitude. Well, the tour has entered the house, and they're headed for the library, where Steele and Daniel are. So as the group enters the library, Steele is caught, standing on a ladder, painting in hand, as he was in the process of pulling it down to get to the safe. And Gwen, somewhat, I think sarcastically, tells the group that, oh, look, they're in luck. It's the new Duke of Rutherford. And, of course, the women in the group greet him as His Grace. And Steele makes an excuse about how he was just checking to see what time is done to poor old Uncle Percy.
Yeah.
Chalmers, remind me to get a restorer in the first thing in the morning, will you? And, of course, Laura, who was initially shocked at Steele being described as the Duke of Rutherford, ducks out of sight behind the crowd and begins seething.
Oh, she's mad.
Oh, yes.
Which she has every right to be.
Yeah.
It's Can all over again, and this time he knows better in a big way. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just occurred to me, though, she did put this hard line, which this episode violates, but, hard line, no business, or all business, no pleasure, no personal. He could have justified this in his mind as saying, well, this is a personal thing, so it really doesn't involve her because it's not business. So.
Well, it is because it affects her business. This scheme that Daniel has put into motion would compromise his identity and therefore their work. So. Yeah,
I mean, you're right, but in his mind, he's justifying it as saying,
I'm sure in his mind he's justifying a lot.
Yeah. Anyway,
I do like Gwen's comment about protecting the family assets.
Family jewels.
Yeah.
Anyway, as Steele and Daniel make their escape, they think they're in the safe and they're clear, but no, they haven't made their escape. Out in the hall, they're concluding that they're going to have to go back and try their shot at the library later. And from behind them, Laura demands to know, and do what exactly?
Yeah, this is hand in the cookie jar moment.
Yes. Well, next we're out on the grounds, and Laura, Steele, and Daniel are walking around. And it's mid-conversation. Laura is expressing her total disbelief in the theory that all Steele is trying to do is prove that he isn't the Duke of Rutherford, and that it's not as if this is where it gets a little weird. It's not as if this is the first time he's pulled something like this. And then she suddenly reverses course, becoming, as Steele puts it, excruciatingly understanding, and suspiciously as well, I would say.
I think suspicious is the right word, because she's standing in front of Daniel. I think she was, and keep in mind they sort of get interrupted by the jouster in full armor, but I think she was verbally trying to trap him into something only to just rip him apart.
I mean, it's understandable that she would want to put up a good front if there were other people there, but she knows that she doesn't have to put one up with Daniel because Daniel knows that Steele isn't Steele. So,
well, I think it's more about appearing. I think it's more about appearing that as if they're united because she feels threatened by Daniel. So I don't think it's about protecting his identity. She knows that Daniel's a con man too, but I think it's more that she's afraid because he ran off with Daniel, that if she doesn't appear to be lockstep and trusting, and if they're, it's kind of like putting on a front for people about your marriage, even though behind closed doors it might be falling apart. You want everybody to think you seem okay because otherwise they might know something's up. That's kind of what I got from this, that she doesn't want Daniel to know there's cracks in the foundation. Either that, or she was trying to gently lull him into turning around and saying, this is, and just kind of tearing him apart. It's one or the other.
Well, yeah, it's almost like she's setting him up for something, but yeah, it's just kind of a weird turnabout. Anyway, as they're talking, as you alluded to, a knight in shining armor, riding a horse, armed with a lance, shows up. And the unidentified knight takes a running pass at Steele, but he and Laura dive out of the way as horse and rider pass. Yeah. But as they get to their feet and check in with Daniel warns them to look out. The mysterious figure has turned around and is headed back toward them a second time. Steele throws Laura out of the way, and then as the rider passes, he grabs the lance, jerking it from the rider's hand. The rider nearly falls off in the process, but manages to stay aright and rides off. The trio head to the stables where they find the empty knight's helmet. Laura muses that someone wants Reggie dead. Steele complains rhetorically that no one will believe that he isn't Reggie, which Laura thinks is a good thing, saying that as long as Steele continues to play the part and be a target, somebody will try to kill him.
This is the second time she's been totally happy with using him as bait.
And Steele says, yeah, that's what worries me. And Daniel tells Harry not to be such a worrywart, and Laura, mimicking Daniel's accent, says, yes, Harry.
Yeah.
It's real subtle, but she does.
Yeah,
Stephanie does slip in a little bit of a mimic in there. So
I like it.
Yeah. Later that evening, there is a gathering of the clan. Glenn is showing a particularly physical interest in Steele. And then suddenly, a rather loud, undefined, and nasal voice cuts through the background din of the conversation. Richie!
Oh, I love this.
It's Laura, hair up, chomping gum, stumbling on high heels as if she's unaccustomed to them. And Gwen asks Steele, who's that? And Angus asks, what's that? That, says Steele, is Myrtle Groggins, my fiance. Laura sidles up to Steele, kisses him on the cheek, and whispers, you know I hate that name.
Yeah.
Payback for painting a target on his back, I suppose.
Yeah.
So
and
grinning,
embarrassing him by showing up like looking like the most low class fiance on the planet. Like she could have shown up in a nice gown and sort of appeared sort of more refined and whatnot. But no, she showed up, Reggie! Like that's done entirely to humiliate him, and I'm here for it.
Yes, and I love it. Grinning, though thoroughly enjoying her annoyance, Steele tells Laura that she's supposed to call him Your Grace, take 3 steps back, and curtsy. And of course, with a tremendously disgusted look on her face, Laura steps back, curtsies, and then through her clenched teeth says, Your Grace.
I love Your Grace. Like it's just if looks
dripping
and words
sarcasm.
could kill.
Dripping sarcasm.
Yeah, this is great. Stephanie, again, Pierce is fantastic with physical comedy, but she really holds her own in this episode.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call what's going on here between the two of them necessarily physical comedy. It's more like attitude comedy.
Well, I just mean like the chomping gum and the tripping on her heels, and just the whole like she just comes across as truck stop waitress, and in the best way, and it's fabulous.
And that's what I was thinking was, remember the episode with the truck stop waitress is
my fair
the
Steele,
twin sisters.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
Steele then calls Laura Bunny, explaining that it's her nickname, his having met her at a Playboy club.
Oh, I love it.
Which, of course, causes the judge to have a sour look on his face at the uncouth name and the uncouth implied profession.
Yeah.
Gwen is put out, sensing a snag in her flirtatious plans. And then Laura, Myrtle, feigns surprised that he hasn't told anyone that they were engaged. But then
Gracie doesn't like
the brag. Yes. Well, the attempts to offend everyone present get cranked up as Laura looks around and says, I think we should get some of that Forest Glade wallpaper and put it up around here. Make it look a little like Sherwood Forest. Give it that medieval mood, Oh, yeah.
The only thing that she could suggest that would be even worse is adding some shag carpet. Like grass,
Green shag carpet, yes.
Yeah. Well, hey, don't laugh. That was our living room back in the 80s. It was green.
Anyway, Steele is also getting uncomfortable with Laura's act, but his discomfort increases when he hears Mildred's voice, followed immediately by her presence.
Myrtle's mom.
Sensing his naming of Laura as Myrtle has turned on him, he uncomfortably introduces Mildred to the group as Mildred Groggins, Myrtle's mother. Talk about painting yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
Anyway, then everybody's headed to the dining room. As they do so, Laura spots the display of
sorry. She makes a comment, and I looked this up because I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
When Mildred comes in, she says, something along the lines of you could fit the spruce goose in here.
Mhm.
And so I had to know what that was. It was the largest.
You don't know?
I didn't know that. I had no idea. So I assume others maybe didn't. So I looked it up, and the spruce goose was the largest wooden airplane ever built. First conceived during World War II when German submarines were sinking hundreds of Allied ships, and there was a growing need to move troops and materials across the ocean. So Henry Kaiser conceived the idea of a massive flying transport and turned to Howard Hughes to design and build it. Hughes took on the task, made even more challenging by the government's restrictions on materials, etc. So it's 6 times larger than any aircraft at the time. It was also known as the Hughes Flying Boat, made out of entirely out of wood, and it flew just one time, November 2nd, 1947. So that is, for those of you who, like me, who didn't know anything about it, that's what it is.
And it didn't fly very far or very high. It got off the water, and I think it only got up maybe 100 feet or so in the air and flew a short distance and then came down and never flew again. And an airplane being made out of wood at that time, because, when planes were first being invented, they did use wood and fabric in them. But during World War II, all the planes really that were being built, be they combat aircraft or transport aircraft, were made out of metal. But the British had a plane called the Mosquito, the de Havilland Mosquito, that was made out of wood. And it was a very feared plane. In fact, it was so feared that Hitler ordered the German developers to develop a German version of the Mosquito. The problem was that they didn't have the craftsmen. In fact, even Britain almost didn't have the craftsmen, because at that time, a lot of the skills required to build that, to manipulate the wood and to do all the things that were required to build that plane out of wood, a lot of those skills had been not entirely lost, but the number of people skilled in that profession and those techniques had diminished greatly. So they had a very difficult time initially finding people to even be able to accomplish it. But eventually they did, and it was a very, very successful plane, very feared by the Nazis. And in fact, it was so feared that not only did Hitler order them to develop their own version of it, they even named it the Mosquito.
Huh. So. Good to know. See, I've learned another plane thing.
World War II, especially Battle of Britain, that's another subject that I am very interested in, along with baseball. So anyway, there you go. You learned something today. Anyway, as they're heading to the dining room, Laura spots a display of ancient weapons, and she picks up a double mace and begins swinging the weapon around, saying,
"That is not a mace. That is not a mace.
The script says it's a mace, so it's a mace."
The script is incorrect, and I know this because my apartment's full of weapons.
Okay, what have you not told us about you and Scott and what are you guys doing that you have to have weapons?
In the bedroom alone, there is a Japanese katana, 2 replica daggers from the Chronicles of Riddick, a throwing axe, and a replica of the Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII.
Do I want to know what you guys do with those things?
That's just in the bedroom. Like, if you go into the living room, there's...
Shall we call Scott Lord Marchbane?
No, nothing weird. But to be fair, it is that weapon, which is actually called a flail, is often mistaken for a mace. Particularly in Hollywood and things like that. So the difference between a flail and a mace... You mean
Hollywood got something wrong?
Hollywood got something wrong, yeah. I know, crazy, right? The difference between a flail and a mace is that a mace is basically the same end, that circular thing with the spikes sticking out of it, but it's attached to a long rod, basically. There's no chain. You don't swing it, it's just basically a club that doesn't move. Whereas a flail is the rod with the chain and then the little ball with the spiky things attached to it. So that is the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've learned something, folks.
You have World War II.
We've learned not to make Sara mad.
You have World War II. I have a history degree that has culminated in a very large weapons collection. And it's not just me. My brothers both started collecting weapons as well along the same time I did. And at one point, we actually did have a flail and a mace, as well as a number of axes and swords and everything else. And there was a point in time where this was when we were all still living at home in our 20s. I'd come back from school during the summer, and I'd, of course, bring my weapons with me. And I remember somebody coming over, and we were like, yeah, you can sit there, but you're going to have to move the sword and the mace out of the way. And they were just like, what is with you people? So, yeah.
Don't make anybody in the McNeil family mad.
Yeah. I hang my purse in the living room. I hang my purse on a throwing star that's stuck in the wall. So,
anyway.
Yeah, you think it's weird? I gotta wonder why they've got all these weapons in the dining room.
Got to put them somewhere.
Seems like a weird place to keep your flail. Anyway,
a lot of arguments happen in the dining room. You got to be prepared.
Yeah,
anyway, Laura begins swinging the weapon around, saying, "Wow, this would give you a headache and a half." And of course, Archie is very put out at her impertinence. He abruptly and roughly takes the weapon from Laura, stating coldly that each of these weapons is authentic, in perfect condition, and has been in this family for generations. I look after them myself and would appreciate it if you would leave your hands off them. And Steele steps over to Archie and warns him that this is the future lady of the manor he's talking to. Which, kind of a nice touch. And then, of course, Gwen quietly tells Angus that that'll happen over her dead body.
Yeah.
Which may be the turning point because, we'll get there.
Yeah.
As they sit down to eat, Mildred looks at the dinnerware. The judge comments to her that she must have been delighted to discover that her daughter's fiancé was a duke. Mildred says she never butts into her daughter's affairs, but just how loaded is this guy anyway? And
Mildred's not acting. That's just Mildred.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not an act.
Gwen, of course, who has just got done saying that Laura, lady of the manor, over my dead body, and then also sensing probably Steele's annoyance with Myrtle and Mildred. Boy, there's a mouthful to say. Myrtle and Mildred Groggins seems to have reassessed her chances of flirting her way into her new cousin's graces, among other things. Tells Steele that, once the dust is settled, she'd be more than happy to come down and help him with any redecorating.
No. Oh, no.
Steele thanks her for her offer and says that he feels fortunate to have all of them there to help him through the turbulent transition. Armstrong comes up beside Steele and whispers in his ear, and Steele's face falls. It's his nanny.
Yeah.
He whispers to Laura, "What do I do?" Answer, "Hunt." Well, Nanny comes in and begins interrogating Steele/Reggie. "What did you call your favorite teddy bear? What did you call the gardener's cat? Who
Pussy
was
Cakes
Sparky?"
was the best answer he could come up with for a cat's name?
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
what?
Amazingly, Steele seems to get all the answers correct, even though they are all terrible answers.
They're awful. Like Pussy Cakes. That's the best name he could come up with for a cat. Not I don't know.
And
Spot.
Pookie for a teddy bear. I mean, at least Teddy.
Yeah, right? Like,
yeah. We won't talk about teddy bears. Anyway.
And I mean, do the cousins think that she really was his nanny, or was she a nanny at some point? Or like, I have so many questions.
I think she probably was the nanny.
Oh, okay.
And so by her accepting Steele as Reggie, that's just more proof that he is who he says he is. Right. Or who Daniel says he is. Anyway, even though all of his answers are terrible, and he seemingly still manages to nail them all, of course, Nanny is overjoyed. Her Reggie has come home at last. And Daniel wipes his face in relief, and Laura shakes her head in disbelief. Later, Daniel is exiting his room when Laura steps out of the door from her room, gets his attention, and calls him in. Daniel gets a somewhat lecherous look on his face, I think.
He does, doesn't he?
And with a jaunty shake of the head, turns and accepts Laura's invitation into the room. Of course, once inside and Laura closes the door, she is confrontational. "We need to talk." Well, Daniel realizes that this is not a social visit, so he cuts to the chase. come to claim your detective, have you? Well, I'm afraid you can't have him. Laura suggests that Steele should be the one to decide that, but Daniel says,
Crazy
well, he
thought.
already has. What? Yeah, so he says, do you really think he would have let me bring him over here if his heart wasn't, willing to go through with this little scheme? And Laura replies in the affirmative, saying that she should, no. When Laura replies in the affirmative, Daniel tells her that she should stop fooling herself. She says, no, his days with Chalmers are over. He's with her now. Daniel says the only reason Steele hasn't left her yet is because the two of them have yet to experience the ultimate moment.
How does he know that? Like,
I guess either Steele has told him or he knows Steele's history.
well, it just seems odd because they haven't seen each other in 2 years. And when he shows up at his apartment, he says, how long's it been? 2 years. It doesn't seem like they've talked. So I guess unless they had a discussion on the plane about his sex life, it seems weird that Daniel would know that they haven't slept together.
Daniel has known Steele long enough that he probably recognizes a pattern.
Oh, you think it's like an educated guess?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
You can tell to a great degree what somebody's thinking or how they're going to react to a situation based on how they've reacted to that type of a situation in the past. And so, if Daniel's seen this before, that could be, or they have communicated. They may not have seen each other, but there may have been some communication of some sort.
Right.
Although, it does seem like that maybe there hasn't been real good communication for a couple of years. Anyway, Laura tells Daniel that he's wrong, that there's more to their relationship than Daniel thinks. That doesn't sound like the keep it strictly personal agreement is in force.
No.
Granted, she could be saying this just to win the argument. Okay.
I think she is, though. Yeah.
It doesn't really sound like that's the case. I mean, the way she says it doesn't really sound like I'm trying to win this argument by any means necessary. It's said almost as if it's a factual statement. Anyway.
Well, I mean, even if they're not romantically involved, the fact that she has feelings for him and he has feelings for her was established. The only reason they're not in a relationship was because she put the brakes on things. So she could just be acknowledging that those feelings are still there, regardless of whether or not they're acting on them.
Well, that's true. Well, anyway, Daniel doesn't buy it. He says, nope, that ain't the case. Laura continues, saying that they both know that Steele feels an obligation to Daniel, and then challenges Daniel by asking him how far he's willing to push it. And Daniel avoids the question by asking Laura how far she's willing to push it. That is, Steele's sense of obligation to her. And leaning forward in her chair, Laura intently says that it's clear that they both can't have him. Daniel then tries to draw Laura into joining himself and Steele, saying that they have created, that her having created a world-renowned detective out of thin air shows a rare and innate talent, and that she has resources that she hasn't even begun to utilize, and that the three of them together could turn Europe on its ear.
He's not wrong.
Well, he's not wrong. No.
Yeah.
But
he doesn't know Laura at all, but he's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong, but he doesn't know. Yeah. But Laura, of course, is indignant at the suggestion, and she emphatically states that once this escapade is over, she is taking Steele back to Los Angeles. And Daniel just as emphatically states that once this is over, he and Harry are going to the south of France.
Cue this little cartoon of the two of them yanking on his arm and like ripping him in half.
Well, next we see Steele in a somewhat grandiose bedroom suite. There's a knock at the door. Shave and a haircut. It's Laura.
2 bits.
Okay, you do know that one. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. Kira, my daughter, in her piano lesson, that was one of the pieces she brought home to play, and she started playing it, and she played the do 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 do, and I went do do, and she looked over it shocked. She's like, "You know this song, Mommy?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've heard it before." So, yeah.
Anyway, Steele lets Laura into the room, and she says that the only explanation for Nanny not blowing the whistle is that Daniel bought her off. And then there's something of a non sequitur nature about this scene coming after the confrontation between Laura and Daniel. because it just seems out of sequence. And the reason is, it is out of sequence. If you go back to the original script, these two scenes are reversed. So after the dining room, it would be Laura telling Steele that there's something wrong with this picture. Daniel must have bought off Nanny.
Yeah.
And then the confrontation between Laura and Daniel happens. So I think it made more sense in the original order. They changed it for some reason. I'm not sure why. But anyway, they did. Anyway, Steele starts to get lost in exalting Daniel's cleverness, but Laura cuts him off, snidely commenting that he seems to be enjoying his role as the new Duke, in spite of the fact that it could get him killed. And Steele, somewhat confused, says, well, he thought that was the plan. Play along until they get to the bottom of it all. Laura says, yes, but let's just make sure that you understand when the game is over. And there's another knock on the door. It's Nanny. Laura rushes off to hide.
Why?
Nanny's...
I don't understand why she keeps hiding. She's supposed to be his fiance. It makes perfect sense she'd be in the room with him.
Well, apparently she doesn't think it does. Or maybe protocol would not be accepting of his fiance being alone with him in his room. I don't know. I don't know what the upper crust British protocol is for these types of situations.
Does her Myrtle Grogan's character strike you as somebody who would give a rat's, what about protocol?
No, but Reggie would be listening to Daniel, and Daniel would be very concerned with protocol.
It just seems like if she took the trouble to make herself his fiance, the point of it was to make sure that she would have access to him wherever and whenever, as opposed to being somebody who...
Maybe it's just that...
I think it was just
maybe
done
it's just
for the
that by
gag.
leaving Steele alone, it gives whoever's the person trying to kill him a chance to kill him so that she can prove.
I think it was meant to be for the visual gag of her hiding every time someone knocks on the door, but it just felt a little bit funny because if she's engaged to the guy, it wouldn't be weird that she'd be in his room.
Anyway, Nanny's brought Pookie, the teddy bear. She's been saving him. She puts Pookie on the bed and tells Reggie that he needs to go to bed now. He needs his rest. She pats his face and then leaves. Laura comes back into the room and heads straight for Pookie. As Laura is complimenting Nanny on her performance, there's yet another knock on the door. It's Archie. He's brought Reggie a nightcap, suggesting that he get into bed and sip it and hang on to Pookie. Lucky bear. He leaves the room. Steele sniffs at the port and then puts the tray down. Laura comes back into the room, but there's yet again another knock on the door. And Laura says, what is this, Victoria Station? It's Angus. A single shot of malt. He suggests Reggie lie down, pop it back, and the next thing you know, it will be morning. Steele, starting to suspect that everybody and everything is trying to kill him tonight, gives a flippant response of, I'm sure I won't know what hit me. After Angus leaves, Steele puts the whiskey down next to the port. Laura comes back out and comments, that bear has been around, as she's looking at the bear. Steele ignores her comments, saying, that only leaves, and there's another knock on the door. Laura says she's starting to feel like a winter coat in Miami, and once again steps out of the room to hide. A winter coat in Miami? You don't need a winter coat in Miami.
Well, yeah, so you wouldn't be taking
70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right, but that means you wouldn't be taking it out and putting it back in again. It would just always be in the closet, wouldn't it?
Unwelcome, unnecessary, unneeded,
gotcha. Okay.
In the way.
All right, I got it.
Anyway, there's another knock on the door. Yeah, Miami coat. Okay, Laura steps out to hide. And then with a somewhat lecherous grin on his face, Steele opens the door to Gwen, who has brought milk and cookies, or as the British say, biscuits.
Oh, yeah, Scott and I have arguments over what is a biscuit and what is a cookie. It gets vicious. He insists that an Oreo is a biscuit, and I'm like, no, it is a cookie. An Oreo is a cookie. And then one day during a particularly heated argument, he picked up the box and he's like, look, it says biscuit right on it. And I'm like, that's French. That's the French word for cookie. Anyway.
Well, as Gwen comes in, Steele notes that she is limping. She tells him that she was out riding on the commons today and her horse threw her. Steele cautiously says that he hopes it was nothing serious. And as this exchange is happening, she has led him over to the bed, suggesting that perhaps he should have a look at it. And they sit down on the bed. Steele grabs Pookie, throws him off the pillows toward the foot of the bed to give Glenn more room to lay down. But as he leans into her, fully intending to examine her from the wrong end, Laura steps out through the door. Laura steps out through the door from the inner room and gives him a hand-turning gesture as if to say, come on, hurry up, get her out of here. Yeah. And so Steele reluctantly begs off, leads Gwen to the door, asking for a rain check, claiming to be lagged. At the door, Gwen suggestively tells Reggie that she's looking forward to it and then gives him an air kiss.
Supposed to be related.
Hey, it's royalty, whatever.
Yeah, so we're Luke and Leia.
Laura comes back into the room, but stops, starts listening, and then asks Steele, do you hear something ticking? And they both look at Pookie. Steele tells her to stay back and that these things are easily diffused if done correctly.
Still pretending he knows how to defuse a bomb.
That's what I was going to... I'm going to guess he took a bomb diffusing course in the last 2 seasons because if you remember, in season 1, Hearts of Steel, where there's the possibility of a bomb in Malcolm Markel's car, Steele commented that it was only a problem for him if there was actually a bomb in the car. Yeah. So he didn't seem to think that those things are easily diffused if done correctly then.
Yeah, well, I mean, those classes are a diamond. They offer them at the Y, so yeah, super easy.
Oh, silly me, I forgot about that. Yeah, and they're free. You don't even have to pay for them.
Exactly.
Anyway, Steele slowly approaches the bed and the bear, saying that one simply has to know how to disconnect the mechanism. And as he's doing this, he pulls out one of the bear's eyes, and Laura flinches, apparently thinking that if there's an explosion, flinching will protect her.
Right. But, well, I guess a normal human reaction, I guess. But
well, it better not be if you're a bomb diffusing expert. Anyway,
fair.
When he pulls out the eye, there's no explosion, and the ticking continues, much to Steele's dismay. He pulls off one of the bear's arms, and then the other eye, and then the remaining limbs, and the ticking continues. Steele looks concerned. Laura looks perplexed, and she glances down at the floor and sees marks on the floor from the bed where it had been. Mm-hmm. And she realizes the bed has been moved. After a moment's consideration, she looks up, and the ticking is coming from the large and very heavy chandelier, which is now directly over the bed since it's been moved. And of course, the chandelier is swinging back and forth. She shouts at Steele, jumps at him, and they both go flying off the bed just as the fixture crashes down, destroying the bed and the remains of Pookie. Steele and Laura rush out of the room, and they're greeted in the hall by the members of the household, save Armstrong. Panicked, Steele demands to know if there's an attic above them. Yes. How do we get there? Stairs, into the hall. Laura and Steele run down the hall, and as they pass Armstrong's room, he steps out to ask, a touch of insomnia, Your Grace? Mm-hmm. I like Armstrong.
I do too.
Upstairs, they find a mechanism to which the chandelier has been attached and which has some sort of mechanical action, and that was the source of the ticking sound. I'm not exactly sure I understand that mechanism, but anyway, there it is.
Yeah, I was a little confused about that too.
So anyway, they begin looking for signs of some other means to access the attic since they didn't pass anybody on the way in. And so they quickly find it in the form of a small door hidden behind a folding floor screen. They follow the passage to a room, which they enter through a hidden door from behind a floor-length mirror. They move through the room to the connecting room, where Steele peeks in around the corner to find Gwen lying in a bubble bath. Gwen is only slightly startled and not at all embarrassed. Steele gets a devilish grin on his face at the sight and tells Laura to stand back because this could get a bit slippery. And Laura, who had not yet looked into the room, leans in to look, but Steele puts his hands up over her eyes, asking Gwen if perhaps she's lost the soap. I guess Steele's volunteering to go find it for her.
Yeah. This is awkward, though, because it's right in front of Laura. It feels like, it feels like he's just being a jerk.
But if they've decided to keep it all professional and no personal involvement, what does it matter?
No, I mean, he's well within his rights to find the soap with anybody he wants to, but it just feels like that's a kind of a jerkish thing to do right in front of the person.
It's a little in your face, but you can make an argument. Anyway, suddenly there's a scream. Laura and Steele run out. They run to the source of the scream and find everybody standing over the body of Angus. He's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back in Steele's room, Laura, Daniel, and Mildred are gathered. As Steele joins them, Armstrong is standing outside the room holding up the fallen chandelier, and as Steele passes, Armstrong calmly asks, "I trust you won't be needing this any longer, Your Grace?"
Yeah.
Inside the room, Mildred doesn't understand why Angus was poisoned. He poisoned the whiskey himself, and then he drank it himself. It doesn't make any sense. Laura explains that somebody else probably poisoned the drink, and Steele says he'd sleep a lot more comfortably if they knew who. Daniel dismisses the concern, saying that Steele will be safe for the night. Steele snidely comments that, well, that's easy for you to say since you're not the one everyone's trying to kill. And then as everyone else begins to leave the room, we see that once again they are being watched through a painting on the wall. After everyone else is gone, Steele puts his arm around Laura, saying that he hasn't had a chance to thank her for getting him out of the way of the chandelier. She says it was all in a day's work, slapping his hand as he has thoughtfully picked up one of the cookies from Gwen, intending to nibble on it, no doubt. They sit on the bed, and Steele begins to work on Laura's sympathies, saying, Laura, as we lay there, huddled together, just millimeters from death, I began thinking of all the things I've left undone in my life.
Yeah.
And Laura questions his use of the word all. Steele clarifies, one in particular, as he puts his arm around her and lays her down on the bed, beginning yet another attempt at a seduction.
This literally seconds after he offered right in front of Laura to find the soap for Gwen.
Yep.
I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, Laura says that Daniel tells her that she's been manipulating Steele. Steele frowns at the notion. Laura continues, saying that Daniel says that the only reason Steele stuck around with Laura is because he hasn't gotten what he's always gotten in the past. Then she asks if that's true. That I haven't gotten what I've always wanted, he asks. And Laura clarifies that Daniel is saying that Steele will only stick around until he gets it. Of course, Steele scoffs at the suggestion, saying that there are many reasons for his staying around, though he conspicuously fails to name any, but makes it very apparent the one that he's thinking of as he leans further into her face.
Well, yeah, and this is a weird... I have to wonder, because when she brings up the topic, she brings up the topic and says that Daniel told her that she's been manipulating him. He pauses and looks genuinely confused at the idea that he's being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
It was... I mean, he then tries to manipulate it to his advantage because obviously the blood has rushed away from his brain at this point. But it's interesting that he's surprised at the concept of him being manipulated by her, or at least that that was brought up, and that I don't know if he's playing dumb when she mentions that he says it's because you haven't gotten what you've always gotten in the past, or if he's genuinely confused by that too, but.
I think he's genuinely confused.
Yeah, and I think that kind of shows that, I mean, obviously we know that's not the only reason why he's sticking around. It's probably part of it, but, it's not the only reason, because I have to guess, and I'm not a guy, but I have to guess there's only so much time you're willing to put into that sort of pursuit before you just give up and, go on to other more willing participants, so to speak.
It's not the only reason he's sticking around, but at this particular moment in time,
definitely
that's the one he's thinking of. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I won't comment on how long a guy sticks around because I think it probably varies. It varies a lot depending on the guy, on the gal, on the situation, on the likelihood of success or failure. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, Laura suggests that perhaps one of the things keeping him around might be his devotion to their work. Steele agrees, and then Laura begins acknowledging his devotion to their work by kissing him and then rolling over on top of him. All in the line of their work, of course.
Yes, of course.
Because they've got an agreement about never mixing business with pleasure, so she wouldn't be doing that.
I think she's just tormenting him because she gets right up off him and she was like, well, we got a safe crack.
Yeah. But until we get to that point, Steele, who is anticipating further acknowledgments, reaches around Laura and takes his watch off.
I noted that too. That's interesting.
I'm not sure the purpose of that, other than as maybe a visual hint as to,
I guess,
further removals he's contemplating.
Because I had it too. I said it's interesting that he takes his watch, like he goes to that much trouble to remove his watch, when I would think doing the activity that he's hoping to do, the watch would be the least of his concerns. You would need to remove the watch.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't say I've ever had that thought.
I got to remove my watch.
Yeah, really. That's just not one of the things I think about removing.
Yeah. It's a funny one. It is a funny one.
Yeah. Anyway, as you said, Laura pulls away from Steele and then sweetly throws the proverbial cold water on his amorous intentions, saying that,
poor guy.
Yes, she was sure that one of the reasons he was staying was indeed his devotion to their work. And oh, by the way, they have a safe to crack.
Yeah.
Which is a teensy bit cruel of her. But I guess maybe it's all payback for the soap. Anyway, next we have seen that Laura and Steele have broken into the safe and are perusing through the documents contained within. Laura reads, "If my son Reginald should become deceased before his investiture as Duke, the entire estate shall be divided equally among my surviving relatives, Angus Whitewood, Archie Whitewood, Glenn Whitewood, and the foundation to save the Sussex speckled blue butterfly." Quite a list of suspects, though now down one, and with several more to go. Steele is listening as Laura reads from the late Duke's will, as he is doctoring the other documents there. And he asks why the killer is so insistent on his being Reggie. After all, wouldn't it be easier not to deal with him at all? But Laura continues. There's a codicil, which is lawyer speak for, oh, we forgot something. Or scriptwriter speak for, I've written myself in a corner, I got to get myself out of it. That's what I'll do. Anyway, the codicil states that if Reginald has not been found by the time of the Duke's death, the entire estate will be tied up in a trust, either until Reggie is found, or for 20 years, whichever comes first, meaning that if Reggie hasn't been found, 20 years would have to pass before the cousins receive any payout.
I have to wonder who would look after the castle for 20 years if nobody's inheriting it. Would it just sit there and rot?
It would pay from the trust. The staff would be paid maintenance out of the trust.
Interesting.
I would presume. I mean, that I would think that would be part of it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So anyway, it's obvious that the solution would be for Reggie to have been found and then kill him before his investiture, freeing up the money for the remainder of the family, and of course for the foundation to save the Sussex speckled blue butterfly. You know, I didn't think to look up to see if that's actually a butterfly or not.
Either, but now I'm going to do that.
Anyway, as you're looking that up, their discussion of the suspects focuses on Gwen. Gwen was limping earlier in the evening, saying that she'd taken a nasty spill from her horse, so she could have been the knight on horseback. And when the chandelier came down, it is a butterfly.
Okay.
Is it endangered?
Well, I mean, not necessarily Sussex based, but there is a speckled blue butterfly. And I don't know if it's endangered. I'm looking more into it. The Adonis Blue Chalk Downward Specialist Horseshoe, blah, blah, blah. Sussex sightings. I'm going to take Sussex out of it because I'm thinking that's maybe screwing up my search here. So yeah, there is a speckled blue. No, silver-studded blue. No, I don't think. Speckled blue butterfly. Here we go. Ha ha. Sorry. It is a Stitch It Central. It's a. Yeah, I don't see. I see silver-studded blue, but I don't see a speckled blue. So,
And even if there is, the Sussex speckled blue butterfly is probably no different than any other speckled blue butterfly other than the fact of where it lives. I mean,
yeah, Sussex
that was
is
one
the
of
area.
the things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things years ago in Oregon. There were a lot of environmental activists who were complicating things for a lot of industries, the lumber industry in particular, claiming that the northern spotted owl was endangered and it was found in this area and you couldn't do this, that, and the other thing. And I recall, I don't know what you would call a bird biologist.
Oh,
but
an
there was
ornithologist?
Well, I know they're experts on birds, but I don't know if they're bird biologists necessarily. But somebody who was expert in bird biology made the point that there was no actual difference in terms of the genetics between the northern spotted owl and any other spotted owl, such as might be found in California or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The difference being only that it just happens to live up here. So he was saying that their argument that it was somehow a different species of bird is a bit like saying that if you moved from London, Ontario to Saskatchewan, then suddenly you become a different species of human. So,
well, to be fair, no, I'm kidding. But I did find.
Okay, for anybody in Saskatchewan, we apologize.
I did find a butterfly that is listed as a Sussex butterfly species called the Adonis blue, and it does have like speckles on it, and it is a species that is currently somewhat endangered. So that could be kind of what they were going with, but it's not obviously the Sussex speckled blue butterfly. They were, I think, making that up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in this part of it here, I realized I did make a slight misstatement earlier. I earlier said that when they came out of the room after the chandelier came down, the only one missing was Armstrong. That was not correct. Gwen was missing because as they're talking about here, they comment on her limping, having the possibility of being the night on horseback. And then when the chandelier came down, she was one who did not come out of her room immediately.
Right.
And they speculate that because perhaps at that time she was taking the secret passageway from the attic to her room, where they found her up to her neck in bubble baths, though probably fully clothed underneath the bubbles. Steele examines his work in doctoring the documents, and as he is mentally slapping himself on the back in congratulations, they hear the sound of a door in the hallway being closed. Somebody is up and about, which is not what Steele and Laura was hoping for. So they hurriedly return the documents to the safe, rehang the painting, turn off the lights, and then rush out of the room. Then we see the door slowly open to reveal Daniel. He steps in, gently closes the door behind him, turns on a lamp, and then eyes the painting on the wall, which conceals the safe. Do you think, in light of what happens later in the episode, that he knew what Steele was doing and up to, or was he maybe going in to make the alteration for Steele, and then having gotten to the documents after Steele got there, he accidentally undid Steele's changes, like two negatives make a positive?
I think I honestly think that given the conversation he had with Laura, they're both feeling insecure about where Steele stands comparatively relationship wise. And I think that he was concerned that Steele would indeed alter the documents like he said he was going to. And so he decided to alter them back. Laura's worried. Daniel's worried. Daniel made that comment to Laura to destabilize her.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly because he's also afraid Steele's not going to stick around. That Laura has turned his head, and there's not much he can do to compete with that. So,
well, yeah, I kind of thought that he was trying to turn him back, but it also occurred to me that maybe it was just one of those two cases of somebody made a change and then somebody else intending to make the same change undid the change. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, the next day, everyone was gathered around the dining table. Daniel is telling the group that, desiring to keep the previous night's unfortunate incident within the walls, His Grace has asked me to look into the matter. He states that his conclusion is that the only person who could have shot at His Grace in Los Angeles, arranged for the chandelier to fall on him in his sleep, and poisoned him with a nightcap. He dramatically pauses. The judge has no patience for theatrics and demands that he get on with it. So Daniel dramatically points and announces, "Archie!" When Archie angrily protests, Daniel points out that he's a military man and a marksman. Archie demands Daniel explain then how, if he's such a marksman and he's the killer, then why didn't he hit Reggie in Los Angeles when he shot at him? Daniel pauses for a moment and then, ignoring the inconvenient question, continues saying that Archie's studies at Sandhurst included extensive courses in chemistry and biology, hence his knowledge of poisons. Archie again demands Daniel explain. If he has such an extensive knowledge of poisons and he was the killer, why didn't he put the poison in the port he brought Reggie? Or better yet, why not in all the drinks? Daniel scoffs at Archie's inconvenient questions. He looks at Steele, who gives him a questioning look that says, in essence, yeah, he's got a point.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel continues on saying that the antique weapons in this room are all genuine, all in perfect working order, looked after by your loving hands. The falling chandelier was one such weapon. Archie stands and begins raging. I shall not be vilified by this nincompoop in the house of my ancestors.
I love that nincompoop is the best word he can come up with. Honestly, of all the insults, of all the things you could call somebody, nincompoop.
And he continues, I tell you, sir, I shall press charges and I shall sue you for... Just then the crossbow, which has been sitting on display in the window alcove directly behind Archie.
This is why you don't keep your weapons in the dining room.
Yeah, you keep them in the bedroom where they're safe.
Yeah, shush. They're on the wall.
Well, it fires a bolt directly into Archie's back as he tries to complete his threat. Slander. He falls face down on the table. Everyone, save Gwen and Nanny, jump to their feet and run to Archie. After confirming that he is quite dead, Steele turns to Daniel and says, it appears Daniel might have been mistaken. Daniel, annoyed that the facts seem to have invalidated his preconceived conclusions, will only acknowledge that he possibly may have been mistaken. Doesn't that sound like Steele? I mean, going off in the wrong direction, and then when confronted by the facts, well, if you're concerned about facts, I mean, sure,
I'm
take
also
that attitude.
Kind of curious as to how Nanny / the gardener managed to set up a timer to have the crossbow go off.
I don't know. Well, I
if
mean,
it's an antique weapon, it wouldn't have.
Wouldn't have a trigger.
Well, it would, but like a modern weapon, sure, you could probably time it to go off, but like an antique weapon.
Well, you have a timer that you attach to it, I would think, and if you could maybe hide it underneath the panel that it's sitting on, so that there's a fishing wire that comes up.
Fired by itself.
Yeah, the timer goes off. It's an old manual clock, maybe, or some manual mechanism that pulls the fishing line.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which then pulls the trigger.
Gotcha.
So you got to think like a criminal to understand these things. Laura steps out over to the crossbow and examines one of the remaining bolts and the view from that point. She then steps over to Steele and points out that if Archie hadn't stood up in front of it, Steele would have been wearing the crossbow bolt instead of Cousin Archie. And then she directs Steele's attention to his chair at the far end of the table, directly in line with the trajectory of fire. And I get a comment here. I think we now learn where Steele gets some of his tendencies to run off wildly into fantastic conclusions without regard to mere facts.
It's genetic.
Yes. Let's see. Back in Steele's room, Daniel continues to defend his solution, saying that they have to admit Archie made an excellent suspect. Steele agrees that he was an excellent suspect.
Yeah. Past tense.
Yeah. Daniel asks why they aren't having Gwen arrested, based on the presumption that she is somehow the last person standing in this winner-takes-all contest. But Laura points out that Not only was the crossbow rigged with a timer, and there's no way to prove that Gwen had rigged it, but that it's also possible that she didn't do it, given that the Foundation to Save the Sussex Speckled Blue Butterfly.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, I can't even say it once fast.
Yeah.
Can't even say it once medium speed.
Can you say can you say purple burglar alarm?
Purple burglar alarm?
Yes. Okay. So there is an internet trend in which it was like a TikTok thing that went onto YouTube where they were asking Scottish people to say purple burglar alarm. They can't do it.
Okay.
There's too many R's.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
listen to my husband attempting purple burglar alarm. It's very funny.
You'll have to save it on tape for us one of these days. Anyway, the Foundation has as much to gain by the death of the Duke's heirs as anyone. Daniel dismisses the alternative, pointing out that Harry's investiture is less than 2 hours away, and that, as far as he's concerned, their chief suspect is right down the hall. Daniel turns to Steele, who has been stretched out on the couch, saying, "Come on, Harry, we'll smoke her out, just like the old days." But Steele shakes his head, saying that the thought of playing decoy to a desperate heiress doesn't appeal to him. And we see Laura give a smug triumphant smile at this.
Yeah, she won. She won that round.
But Daniel, not to be deterred, and with a sense of wounded pride, says that then he will do it on his own. Well, as Daniel leaves the room, Mildred comes in. Steele asks how Nanny's doing. Mildred says she's resting, but she's not sure how much more of the mayhem Nanny can take. Laura admits that that's pretty much the situation for all of them, and then tells Steele to come on. They have to find out about the speckled blue butterfly.
I'm kind of curious about how the speckled blue butterfly ended up on the will in the first place. Nanny looks to be well into her 70s or 80s, and the Duke was 96, so maybe the Duke and Nanny had a little something going, and that was her pet passion, so he put the Foundation in his will, because otherwise are we led to believe the Duke passionately cared about the Sussex speckled blue butterfly?
No, probably not. So yes, I think
not,
yeah, the Duke and Nanny, although you never know. Given what we know about British royalty and some old geezers that have these interesting predilections, and Gwen's flirtatious attitude, you never know.
Yeah, with that. Oh God, we're not going to go there. Keep going.
Anyway, next we see Laura knocking on the door of a small building, which displays the sign that reads, "Foundation to Save the Sussex Speckled Blue Butterfly." But it seems the Foundation is closed for the day. So as Steele stands watch, Laura reaches into her purse, grabs her lockpick set, and commences breaking into the office. Then they casually stroll in. Back at the family estate, Mildred brings Nanny her tea. Nanny is distraught, repeatedly asking, "Where is her Reggie? Where's her Reggie?" And as Mildred tries to reassure her, we see the toes of a pair of rough-looking work boots sticking out from underneath the wall screen. Back at the offices of the Foundation to Save the Sussex Speckled Blue Butterfly, Laura and Steele discover that the Foundation consisted of the same 17 people until about 3 years earlier, when somebody by the name of Elizabeth Perkins joined. A year and a half later, she became the president. Steele holds up a letter from the Duke's solicitors in London, notifying the Foundation that they've become beneficiaries to his will, dated 3 years prior. About the same time, Elizabeth Perkins joined the Foundation.
Or maybe the Duke was 96. Maybe he was like so out of it at that point, like Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever. Maybe she added it to the will.
That could be. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
Anyway, they note that was about the same time Elizabeth Perkins joined the Foundation, and Steele catches something about the name Perkins. He's wondering why it sounds so familiar. And then after a moment's thought, both Laura and Steele realize it. It's Nanny Perkins, at which point I say, foul, foul, foul. Because at no time prior to this were we given Nanny's name.
No, they didn't say her last name. They just called her Nanny. You're right. I wondered about that.
I have a problem with mystery writers who do this. It's not playing fair, guys. If you
No,
want
we
to know
want to be
how
able
to,
to guess. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you want to play fair, go study the early works of Ellery Queen, because he gives you all the clues. You're never going to figure it out, but he gives you all the clues. And in fact, 2 chapters before the end of a book or thereabouts, it will say, challenge to the reader. You have all the clues to solve it. Nothing has been withheld. That's how you play fair. You just got to be really good at your craft so that nobody figures it out, which Ellery Queen was. Anyway, Steele and Laura rush off, headed back to the estate. As they go, they discuss the case, concluding that although Nanny may be the mastermind, there's got to be somebody else doing the actual dirty work, somebody close to the family, somebody who wouldn't be suspected, somebody strong, somebody who knows the castle, somebody who rides horses and can handle tools and weapons. Steele concludes that the person doing the dirty work has to be Red Skelton.
Yeah.
He cites the Fuller Brush Man, Red Skelton, Janet Blair, Columbia, 1948. Skelton plays a Fuller Brush salesman who gets blamed for society murders when in actual fact it was committed by the butler.
He just wants it so badly to always be we got the butler once. You can't have it twice. Yeah.
Well, he beams at his brilliance, but Laura dims his brights, reminding him that their butler is close to 80 and probably couldn't even mount a horse, let alone gallop one across the lawn holding the lance.
Yeah.
Steele wonders, well, then who? Inside the house, Mildred has discovered the answer. It's Fred Blocks, the groundkeeper, who is now holding a gun on Mildred. Nanny gets up, no longer the feeble-minded Nanny of before. She orders the groundskeeper to take Mildred, Daniel, and Gwen down to the potting shed. She wants everything to be in order when Reggie returns. And by in order, she means everyone out of sight and unable to make trouble for her.
Yeah. Or dead. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you don't know that yet, though. You get the impression at this point that, okay, we're just going to lock them up in the shed.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, we soon find out that that's not the case. Anyway, as Nanny and the groundskeeper escort the trio to the shed, Daniel accuses Blocks of killing Angus, and Blocks corrects him, saying that he poisoned Reggie's drink, and it's not his fault if Angus drank it. Mildred asks if that applies to Archie, too. And Blocks says, no big deal. If he hadn't gotten with the arrow, he and Nanny would have gotten rid of him sooner or later.
I find it funny that he goes out of his way to say, no, I didn't poison the drink. That was a total accident. And then he's like, yeah, but we would have killed him anyway. Like, okay, sure.
Casual. Yeah. Well, it turns out that the plan is not to take the trio and lock them up in the shed, but to feed them to the wood chipper, starting with Daniel. And after Nanny throws Mildred's suitcase into the chipper as a way of demonstration, Blocks tells Daniel, don't worry, you won't feel a thing. And then you'll be mulch.
Disagree. I disagree heavily on that statement of you won't feel a thing.
Yeah, I imagine there will be at least a moment's worth or two of pain, yes.
Also, I'm not sure if and I don't, I'm not about to Google search this because then police will show up at my door, but like, I don't know if a wood chipper could handle a human body. At least not in totality. I don't know that it could chip bone.
Well, I mean, it can deal with some pretty hard wood tree limbs. So I didn't really question whether it could handle it in that respect. But I think it would wind up being so messy and so gummed up.
Well, that too, right? Like you'd have blood spraying everywhere.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not about to Google, could you dispose of a body with a wood chipper? Because like I said, that could put me on a list, but I just don't know if this is the best way to dispose of them.
I suppose the best solution would be to get a wood chipper and get somebody to volunteer to get thrown in. We can try it.
For science, yeah.
Yes, for science. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Nothing sinister, just for science. Yes. Anyway, what is it they say? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Anyway, Daniel grabs, realizing that he's standing next to a garden rake, head down, Daniel stomps his foot down on the head of the rake, causing the handle swing into Blocks' arm. Daniel grabs Blocks' arm with one hand, the gun in the man's hand with the other, and the two begin struggling. The struggling does take them close to the chipper, and then the gun goes flying out of Blocks' hand. Daniel tells Mildred and Gwen to run for it, and then they, along with Nanny, run over to where the gun flew. Although I do have to say, it seems like the gun flew a great deal farther than I would have thought it would under the circumstances.
Yeah.
But anyway, as Nanny, Gwen, and Mildred paw through the piles of sawdust for the gun, Blocks gets the advantage in the wrestling match with Daniel and has Daniel head first part way into the feed chute of the chipper. Steele, having just arrived in time with Laura, rushes over, throws Blocks aside, and pulls Daniel out. Daniel starts to thank Harry for helping him, at first in a voice of, "Fair bitch," several octaves higher than normal, and then tries again in a more normal voice. He then spots Blocks rushing toward them from behind, shovel in hand, intent on shoveling anyone into the wood chipper. But Steele turns, tackles Blocks, and although the flying shovel does go into the chipper, nobody else does. Meanwhile, Nanny has recovered the gun. She points it at Gwen and Mildred and orders them to mind their manners. Well, unseen by Nanny, Laura has run up and slipped behind the pony wall, which is behind Nanny. As Nanny turns and steps toward the ongoing wrestling match between Steele and Blocks, Laura grabs what appears to be about a 2-inch diameter fire hose, tosses the end of the nozzle at Nanny's arm. The weight of the nozzle causes the hose to wind around Nanny's arm, causing her to drop the gun, which then is picked up by Daniel. The fight is over. The judge arrives, papers in hand, and inquires, "Here, here, what's going on? The ceremony starts in less than 10 minutes. Laura informs the judge that there isn't going to be any ceremony, and he asks, well, why not? Steele says that a closer look at those documents will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is not Reginald Whitewood. Well, the judge is frustrated at Steele's continued insistence on denying the obvious. The judge has spent the last 2 hours poring over every word, every nuance in these documents, and with a scolding sternness in his voice and a frown on his face, emphatically states that absolutely everything is in order. Steele grabs the documents, saying, "Let me look at these." He gives Daniel a dirty look as he flips through the pages. And then he turns to Daniel, accusing him of having changed the documents.
Yep.
Steele and Laura look at each other, then Laura, trying to be inconspicuous, moves away toward the chipper, it seems. Steele turns to the judge and asks, "Without these papers, there's no way of proving that I am the heir to the Rutherford estate, correct?" Daniel begins tapping on Steele's shoulder in an attempt to thwart what he realizes is Steele's intentions.
Yep.
But Steele swats Daniel's hand away. The judge, somewhat confused by the turn of events, reluctantly concedes the point. And then, without any warning, Steele swings his arm and throws the documents into the chipper, which promptly shreds them. Daniel stands motionless, a shocked, disbelieving look on his face. The judge shakes his head in a pitiful manner and says, "Oh, your grace." Steele slaps Daniel on the arm, smiling. Later, inside the grand hallway of the house, Steele tells Daniel that they have to talk. Daniel dismissively tells Harry that there will be plenty of time for that later. Steele repeatedly glances off to the side to the open hallway and rooms on the upper floor, and we can guess that he's glancing toward Laura, at least figuratively, if not in actuality. Yeah. And Steele begins, "Daniel, you know how I feel about you." And Daniel responds, "I know I love you like the son I never had. Being with you these last few days has been truly invigorating, Harry. Truly invigorating." Which makes it all the more difficult for Harry to say what he has to. He can't accept a ticket to Paris. It's tempting, but the magic is gone. He's found a new life in Los Angeles. Daniel argues that a new life isn't necessarily everything. Steele says that, well, even if it isn't everything, at least it's a start.
I know Daniel's got his own plans with those tickets. We find out in a minute, but I do like the fact that even though he hasn't told, and again, we don't know if the writers ever intended to go this direction, but he hasn't told Steele who he really is, that Daniel feels comfortable enough with their relationship to say, like, "I love you" to him.
Drop hints.
"I love you like the son I never had." That is something impressive for a grown man to say to another man. Now, granted, he raised Steele, so there is an element of power dynamic there. And then for Steele to, in turn, say, like, I I have I feel the same way about you, but this is not my life anymore. It is very much the metaphor of a child breaking away from a parent and saying, I'm going on a different path. I've chosen this life here. And I mean, despite the fact that we know that Daniel had a backup for those tickets, it's a pretty sweet conversation between the two of them, because it seems to, anyway, draw the line of where Steele's priorities are. Now, obviously, those priorities get muddled when Daniel shows up again, but
well,
I like it.
I will take exception to the term power dynamic that you used, because I don't really think it's a power dynamic thing, although there is an element of that in their relationship. I will grant that. Well, but I don't think his statement here is really demonstrative of a power dynamic situation or an attempt to use a power dynamic to control and manipulate.
Oh, no.
I think it's simply that he's saying, and as you said, he basically raised Steele, and so he does think of him as a son, and he's got this sense of not only responsibility and a sense of wanting to guide Steele as a parent would, but also just a genuine love for the man as a parent would toward a child. And it's, you're right. They probably have not really decided at this point on the ultimate conclusion on this, but if you go back knowing what happens at the end, you can go back over these things and you can see Daniel's dropping hints.
Yeah.
Daniel's always been dropping hints.
Well, I didn't mean power dynamic as in like I have power over you. I just meant more that their relationship has always been more father-son or mentor-student as opposed to two equals, because when Daniel found him, he was a child.
Okay. Gotcha.
And Daniel was an adult, right? So him saying I love you is not, I mean, it never would have been perceived as romantic, but it's not I love you as a friend. It was I love you as a son, meaning that I have cared for you. I have watched you grow. This is a relationship that has evolved from him as a child to now him as an adult saying, okay, but as an adult, I respect all that you did for me and love you back, but I'm now on this course of my own life and the magic is gone, meaning obviously the con man game, that part of things. So it's a really sweet little moment that I think you're right. They're dropping hints left, right, and center. It's great.
The funny thing is that even though you and I both agree that they probably had not made the decision at this point that Daniel would be revealed as Steele's father in the future, I think it's kind of A feeds into B feeds into A thing, because as we know the ending, we can see that, these are hints that Daniel has been dropping all the way along. And at the time they were going through the series, they probably, if our conclusion is correct, they weren't dropping these, intending them to be hints until they got to the end, at which point they said, oh, you know what? We've built this situation where that is what this relationship is.
The only thing that I can think of to hint towards them planning this ahead of time is the reason for switching these episodes was Steal Your Heart Away. They might have felt if Steal Your Heart Away had aired first, because that's where he goes to Ireland looking for his father, then they might have felt the next episode being blue-blooded, with Daniel reminding him that he's loved him like a son, would be too much of a heavy-handed hint. But I don't know. Like, that's, again, one of those, we'll never know whether they knew or not. So
I'm guessing that the season running order decisions were made based on demographics, what they thought would be most interesting at the time, given the Olympics and other things, and the fact that they spent all this money on these European episodes.
Which, there's one right after this. Their frequent flyer miles are through the roof here.
Right. But by alternating them, starting out with a European episode and then alternating them, I think they probably thought, well, we can get people to watch multiple episodes across simply by virtue of the fact that they're going to see all these touristy things as they watch these episodes. And that'll be a draw. So I can kind of understand how they might have approached that as far as their decisions. I don't necessarily agree with them. I can understand how they came to that conclusion. Totally wrong. Anyway.
True.
Where were we? Yes, back in the episode. Yes, Steele is trying to say that even if everything isn't everything, at least it's a start, and begins to explain about him and Laura. But Laura strides up to the pair, announcing that the cab is waiting. And Daniel, at this point, seems to graciously accept this temporary defeat from Steele. And as they hug, we hear Gwen's voice calling to Daniel. And as he and Steele continue to hug, Daniel tries to wave Gwen off, but she plows forward, asking, "Did you get the ticket from him?"
Yeah, I like that.
So obviously Daniel knew what Steele was going to do. He knew. And this was all just an act. And maybe partially just to keep up appearances of, I'm continuing to fight for you.
Yeah, you know, I think that's what it was.
Bring you back. But it could have been also just as a way to kind of have that friendly, loving family moment. Anyway,
I wonder what he would have done if Steele had been like, "Okay, let's go to the south of France."
Yeah, really. Anyway, so Daniel and Steele separate. Steele has a harsh look on his face as he first looks at Daniel and then at Gwen. Yeah. Well, Daniel tells Gwen, yes, he's got the ticket. And then as they're leaving, he begins to expound on his plans for them. "We'll open up my villa and venture forth from there. We must be prepared, Gwen. One never knows where or when one may encounter the real Duke of Rutherford." And Steele still looks put out. Laura's grinning and I think silently laughing as Gwen expresses her hopes that I hope it won't take too awfully long. I wonder how much she's really hoping that, because given her attitude, I think she's probably got her eyes set on Daniel now.
I wonder how much he attempts to actually try to find the Duke.
Oh, no. No, he's just going to prolong it.
I'm guessing he's just going to, mess around a little bit, and then eventually she'll get tired of it and leave.
Yeah. So anyway, as she says that she hopes it won't take too long, Daniel assures her that success is right around the corner. Yeah. The famous line of con men. It's just right there. Anyway, as soon as Daniel and Gwen are out of the house, there's a honk on the horn, and Laura declares that it's Mildred with a car and asks, "Shall we go, Mr. Steele?" And as they begin to exit, a small but deadly catapult fires, launching a spiked metal ball toward the statue which they have been standing in front of just moments earlier. The ball strikes the statue, which then breaks and falls. Shocked, Laura and Steele turn and look at the one last attempt on the life of the new supposed Duke, and we freeze. I'm
glad you said catapult here, because some may also misinterpret it. A lot of people get confused between the difference about the differences between a catapult and a trebuchet. And mix them up.
I know the difference. I couldn't explain it probably coherently if I tried to. But
catapult is literally just the board with the little bowl, I guess you'd call it, that just springs up and shoots something forward. Right. Trebuchet, similar to a flail, will have a chain, and it'll kind of, it's more of a mechanism that kind of flings it upwards and over, and so it goes further. And that's what my history degree is worth.
Also, the catapult gets its energy by being pulled under tension, and then that tension being released, whereas a trebuchet gets its energy by having the opposite end pulled down. So it's an active energy as opposed to a reactive energy or a release of energy. So,
Do love me a good trebuchet, though. Fun.
Where have you got that hidden in your house?
I don't have a trebuchet, sadly, but the Renaissance Fair, the local Renaissance Fair that we go to, will take a trebuchet and they will shoot pumpkins at stuff, and it's fun. Yeah.
Poor defenseless pumpkins.
That's what I do with my time.
Anything else?
No,
I think say about this episode?
We've covered everything from the spruce goose to the difference between a mace and a flail. So,
okay, well then, our website, www.SteeleWatching.com. You'll find show notes, Amazon links to the Fuller Brushman, and links to various resources, including our social media, such as
Facebook fan page, Twitter page, and Instagram, as well as the officially unofficial Steele Watchers Facebook group, where we all hang out and talk about all things Remington Steele, and it's tons of fun, and you should join us.
Yes. And I get myself in trouble time and time again.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He does a lot. It's fun.
Next episode is Steal Your Heart Away, where a critical piece of music is removed from the DVD on the bogus excuse that it was due to licensing issues.
Yeah.
No, that is absolutely not true. That's the official excuse, but that's not true.
Right. Well,
anyway,
save the rant, because it'll be good for that episode.
Yes, I feel a rant coming on.
Stay tuned.
So anyway, I guess that's it. So bye-bye, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that, yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating? Yes,
every
it does.
Single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.SteeleWatching.com to sign up.